Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the April 20th, 2022 meeting of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And I would ask you to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today we're going to run the hearing on House Bill 1598 FN. And after we conclude that, we will exec that bill and several others on the Ways and Means docket to meet the FN deadline that's fast approaching. At this point, we begin the hearing on House Bill 1598 FN and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Abbas. Welcome.
What? Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. Thank you in advance for taking my testimony today. I'm here to introduce HB 1598. My name is Darrell Abbas, and I'm a state representative. I represent Rockingham County District 8. I'm in my second term, and I currently serve as the chairman of the House Committee for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Before I get into the contents of what is HB 1598, my voting record's a matter of public record, and I've traditionally and historically have opposed any type of recreational cannabis policy. In my first term, I spoke on the House floor in opposition to HB 481. I voted against it in the committee, and I voted against it twice as a member of the House. I testified in this room before the Senate Judiciary Committee in opposition to that bill last term. In this term, I want to say we had about 10 to 12 recreational cannabis bills. Some of them are CACRs. I opposed all of those. And then people ask, well, why would I file this bill? So that's what I'll explain to this committee today. Some of the concerns I have with the recreational cannabis policy, it's really a matter of not if, it's a matter of when. So whether I support the concept of recreational cannabis or not, my own personal feelings aside, I saw last term it was Senate Bill 88. It was vetoed, and both chambers overrode the veto. This year we had Senate Bill 38. I believe that the Senate overrode the veto and the House sustained that veto by 1 or 2 votes. The homegrown bill, we call it, we had that bill last term. It passed the House with a veto-proof majority. I believe it's currently in the Senate now, and it passed the House again with a veto-proof majority. The committee recommendation was interim study. That was overturned on the House floor, and it passed with that veto-proof majority. I think it was 235. I forget the exact number, but it was a veto-proof majority. My understanding is it has a positive recommendation from the Senate Judiciary Committee going forward. So what I put together was what I thought was the most conservative policy I can come up with that would mitigate some of the negative social impacts that, whether you believe those social impacts are attributed to cannabis or not, this was one way to do it. First of all, the overtaxation and overregulation of cannabis creates a huge problem. It causes the consumer price to go up much higher. And as a result of that, what happens is the price goes higher, and then the taxation on top of that allows a black market to become very successful. If you look at the fiscal note on HB 237, which was tabled in the House, that was the sales tax, transfer tax, recreational cannabis bill. And the fiscal note would attribute about a $340 million gross sales in the legal market, with $311 million would be attributed to the black market or illegal market. And to me, setting up a policy that you're going to lose about a 40 to 45% revenue share to an illegal market, I thought it was not comprehensible. And I do have a copy of that fiscal note I can provide to the members of the committee after my testimony. So the model that I took, or at least the approach with HB 1598, was really modeled after what we've done successfully in our state already, which modeled it after the state liquor store model. Now, cannabis would not be sold out of the state liquor store, but it would be regulated and managed in a similar way. And as a result of that, the revenue from the state would not be as a result of the taxation of cannabis. It would be a result of the revenue from the sale itself. What that allows us to do, and we see it with liquor, in the region where we are in New Hampshire, in New England, it's not even disputable. The state has the lowest price for liquor, and people come from all over the place to purchase in large quantities. If you were to mimic that model with cannabis, you would be able to maximize your revenue. The other advantage is that the markup on cannabis is much higher than it is with liquor. So if you look at the projected gross sales of cannabis from HB 231, what they factored is the average person they use the term smoke, which means we're talking about the flower, would be around 6.5 ounces per year. If that was sold at $300 an ounce, which is much lower than any of the surrounding states from what I understand, you're looking at a gross revenue of just $390 million just off of the flower sales. The fiscal impact did not take into consideration out-of-state consumers. Well, your liquor sales, about 40 to 50% go to out-of-state consumers. That's what's been reported. If you were able to come even remotely close to that, it would allow us to, again, maximize the revenue. Now, I understand there's some concerns about the legality of this. Listen, cannabis is against federal law, whether it's for medical purpose or recreation. It's against federal law. Yet this body, the House, we have a medical cannabis policy that runs afoul to any type of federal law. The DEA right now can come into this state and shut those down. It's just a matter of what it is. The way I approached 1598 was I just completely ignored the federal law, for better or for worse. I feel that if we're going to follow the federal law, we shouldn't be promoting any type of recreation or medical for that matter. So that's the approach that I took when this was put together. I know where the community I represent, Rockingham County District 8, which is Salem, it's right on the border of Massachusetts. Whether it's Tingsboro, Dracut, the store in their retail shop in Haverhill is literally, it's a stone's throw from the Plastow border. They're set up all around the border. So all the negative social impacts that are associated with a recreational cannabis policy, respectfully, we're already dealing with a lot of those. People are going over the border, purchasing it, bringing it back here. Yet, as a state, we're not getting any of the economic or revenue benefit that we could get from that. So I understand that there's statistics, and those statistics are valid, that there's increased negative social impacts, for example, increased accidents related to cannabis. That's a matter of fact, factually speaking. However, with the cannabis use being rampant already, I'm not sure you're going to see the same spike as some of the other states have. There's only one way to truly live that one out. But what I would say is one thing that's important to me, and I have young children, and when I drive, my office is in Lexington, Massachusetts. When I drive to work, I see these glowing billboards like Las Vegas style for cannabis stores, and I find that's not a very good message that I think we're sending the youth in our state. But what I will point out is that Massachusetts right now has about 387 retail stores, either opening or already operating. And I don't want that to be the way we do it in New Hampshire. The way we do it with our liquor stores, Salem, we have a population of 31,000 people, give or take. There's one liquor store. And there's no liquor store in Londonderry. I don't believe there's one in Derry. There's one in Londonderry. And then there's one liquor store in Londonderry. If there was a if you were to have a policy such as with the sales tax, transfer tax model that you see in HB 237, Salem would have 5, 6, 7 stores. They would just be everywhere. And that's the direction the state would be going in at some point. This is a way to kind of minimize those social impacts, having one store in a large town, not needing to have that many stores. And I think that's very important to think about long term. What is the best for our state? I thought you maximize the revenue, do your best to reduce the social impact, negative social impacts as much as you can. In respect to the idea of what to do with that revenue, I thought it was important that if the state were to essentially at least run the retail side of the business, it is important to use that revenue to give it back to the people as much as you can. One of the concerns, and I think we all hear a lot, is property taxes. And at the state level, there's only so much we can do to reduce property taxes because the tax rate and local spending we're limited on what we can do to control that. The idea was to offset the statewide education property tax. And I thought that's something we can deliver throughout the entire state. And that's a win for everyone that's a win throughout the entire state. With the wisdom of the Ways and Means Committee, they also decided to add some other revenues, shares to address their debt with the retirement system. And Representative Lang will testify today and provide more information on that. I thought that was a good approach to go about it. In respect to, I hear a lot about the field sobriety test issue. That's a huge problem. There is no field sobriety test, at least not one that's accepted as reliable by the court system. I will say, in respect to any recreational policy, that's a problem that needs to be fixed regardless of your position on HB 5098. I think it's in the public interest to be able to invest into finding a reliable field sobriety test so that problem can be addressed, because that's a problem that's not going away, recreational cannabis aside or not. And I would just ask to keep an open mind and think about 10 years from now, do we think that there's going to be a recreational policy or not in place? And what do we think that policy will look like? For me, HB 5098 is ultimately a concession on my end, that I can live with a more of a controlled state model rather than what I would say overflow model. And you see the same mistake amongst the other states, is that they rolled out a policy too fast and they were unable to roll it back. And it was too much too soon. And some of those states are still dealing with the negative consequences of that to this day. We have a successful model we saw with liquor. There's no reason why we can't duplicate that. And I'll answer any questions, and I want to thank everyone for the time.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. I believe you made a statement that this bill ignores federal law. My question is, how can you ignore federal law if we're not supposed to have conflicting laws? And if the federal government has this classified as a drug for which somebody can have a felony, and therefore having their Second Amendment removed from them, aren't we one administration away at the federal level from someone deciding that they're going to disarm the citizens by going after those that are using marijuana recreationally or medicinally?
Thank you for the question. In respect to the Second Amendment, and respectfully, if you want to enjoy the Second Amendment as much as I do, it's your choice. It's someone's choice whether they want to purchase or use cannabis. And I think it's very well known amongst the Second Amendment community, the risks that go along with that. I think one thing that points out is the failure of the federal government really to take any action. Their inaction on this issue has been more of a problem than anything else. They've literally done nothing to enforce this law, yet it stays on the books, yet they can then use it to then deny or negatively impact your constitutional rights. And that's just, to me, shows an overall failure of the federal government on this topic. In respect to the conflict on federal law, all I'm saying is listen, I'm not going to call anyone out by names, but there's members who are sitting here today who voted in support of the medical policy that was passed in 2013. The medical cannabis policy runs afoul to that. And all I'm saying is if we're going to support a policy for medical cannabis, which violates federal law, the DEA can come in and shut down those businesses right now, arrest the people who are working in the store. They can arrest people buying from the store. That's what they can do. And it's just a matter of fact. Now, I would find it very odd and concerning that the federal government would target just the state of New Hampshire. I really would be concerned why are they just doing that. But that's what's happening. So I'm just saying that if you're going to support the medical program and the medical cannabis policy, there's already a precedent for us ignoring federal law on the subject of cannabis. In respect to the preemption argument that you hear a lot, I've heard it several times. That Supreme Court case, now that when that came down, the Bush administration, the directive was for the DEA to be closing down the recreational stores in California. Since that time, you've had over 20 states, probably even more, adopt medical policies, and you've had about a dozen states now adopt a recreational policy on top of that. And the directive from the federal government was actually to not enforce those laws. So when the court decides whether it's a preemption argument, they look at, was it the intent of the federal government to maintain control over something? Although they didn't repeal the law, sending out a memorandum with a directive to not enforce the law, I find it hard to believe that they would then argue that they intended to maintain control of it. That's my opinion. My point is that case is subject for review by the Supreme Court. The reason why it's not going up that level is that there's still not you need someone to get arrested. You need a defendant or a plaintiff, per se. You need someone to be harmed by it, and without them enforcing it, there's no one to challenge it. So it's kind of, to me, a stale case.
Follow up.
Please.
Have you contacted our Washington delegation to find out why they have made no effort to devolve this back to the states?
I have sent an email. But I do know Senator Shaheen is on record. Recently, I think the House that passed the recreation bill, and I think she's come out and historically said she was against any type of recreational policy.
Okay. And one final question.
Please.
Could you speak a moment about the liability of the state who would be directing their state employees to directly violate a federal law?
So, again, when you say liability, you're talking about the potential for criminal liability?
You're instructing them to carry out action for a selling of a drug that is a felony federally, and where's the liability of the state come in on that in directing a state employee to do an illegal action?
I believe that if from a liability, the state employee would be identified by the state of New Hampshire. With that being said, no one is being forced to do anything. Any employee of the state, from what I understand, is they're voluntarily. Yes, they're getting paid to be there, but they're not under any contract, or they're not being forced to work in that environment. If someone's not comfortable doing that, I wouldn't want to sell the cannabis. That's just me, but that's my choice. I think anyone who you would hire to work in that and to facilitate that, it would do so knowing what exactly the risk that they entail. But I would again take concern and exception to the federal government specifically targeting the state of New Hampshire, rather than not target Maine. They don't want to target California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Massachusetts. They want to target New Hampshire. That's the real question we should be asking, is why would this state be targeted, and specifically our state employees? To me, that wouldn't pass the sniff test, and I would find that to be very alarming. But in respect to what would happen there, I mean, it's a violation of federal law. And respectfully, I don't see a difference. We give a license to a medical facility to violate federal law. We help facilitate that. If someone were to try to break into that medical facility, the local law enforcement would be reported as a robbery, or just like it would be a convenience store, and it would be investigated just like it was any other crime. So we help facilitate the violation of federal law by giving licenses, and in that regard. So to me, it's the fact that we're going to take a more of a hands-on approach doesn't really change much in the reality of the situation.
Thank you.
Further questions from members of the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. Just one question. The way I read it, municipalities don't have an option to either opt in or opt out. They just can regulate. Can you tell me why you didn't choose an opt-in option?
So they have the opt-in, opt-out. To me, if it's going to be run by the state, they're still going to be going through the zoning process. They would still have to kind of facilitate where they're going. There's going to be a limited amount of stores. If a community wants to opt out, I know, for example, Raymond, New Hampshire has already passed, they already passed laws, or sorry, local ordinances, essentially opting out, and that would be honored. But by the time this program gets up and running, I mean, it's going to start with a limited amount of stores, and hopefully it would expand to what we have similar with our liquor stores. I believe it's about 75 of them. I think the fiscal note took into consideration the possibility of about 10 stores to be the starting point, which it's going to be even less than that. But with that being said, the communities have ample opportunity to opt out. Having to have the communities all opt in, the problem was that you would have a model without anywhere to put your stores, because no communities would have opted in by this time. So I think you want for the communities who have an interest in this. I know I've even spoken to members of the town of Salem saying, keep an eye on this bill. If it were to become law, the town should make a decision on what they want to do, if they want to opt out or not. But to put this in place without any communities opting in, you have now a model in place, and you'll be giving out licenses for cultivators, because the cultivation business and manufacturing and transportation testing will still remain private, which is a tremendous business opportunity for the state, especially in the farming side of things or the growing side of things. But without having any communities opted in, you'd be giving licenses and you set up a plan without anywhere to actually operate. So it could be a holdup. If a community really wants to go, they don't want this and doesn't work for their town, I think they would take the initiative and put on the ballot pretty quickly.
Further questions? Representative, could you speak to the issue of capping the potency of the marijuana that would be offered in our stores?
So now, when the bill was amended in the House Ways and Means Committee, I'm not sure if it addressed the potency amount. I think with the rule, a lot of the discretion I left for the Rules Committee to really address and how they want to go about this. I have no objection to having a potency limit. I think that's responsible to do that. How they want to do that, the one thing challenge we had in the House was the issue of edible products was getting tossed back and forth. Respectfully, that is a 30%, 40% market share. But for some, that's a deal breaker. But any type of potency limit, I would have no problem with that. And it should have a potency limit, and it should have some clear labeling. I think a lot of that's left for the rules, and I really trust that when this is all said and done, a lot of that's going to be worked out on the rules side. Same thing with the cultivation side. And if you were to grow something, I know they're able to grow these strains that have such a high potency limit to what they would have 20 years ago. The science and expertise that goes into that's beyond my scope of knowledge. So I didn't want to pretend to know exactly how to put that into writing. But I think I would trust that the Liquor Commission would do a very good job making sure that whatever product hit the retail market was safe, as safe as possible for the public.
Do you have any comments on the fact that by not including edibles, we will create a probably explosive black market for those products, which are very much in demand?
So there is the inclusion of edibles to some degree. What it essentially says is you would have to have a medical card, meaning if you were going to purchase the edible product, that you would still have to have a medical card. It doesn't necessarily be a medical card from New Hampshire. So,
To my question, Representative, would it not create a black market for those products?
I'm not sure that it would, because what people could do is purchase the flower themselves and make their own. My only this bill, when it was put together, involved a compromise with a lot of people. And if you had flat out recreational edibles, what I understand would have been a deal breaker for many. It wasn't a deal breaker for me, but I have a concern that you don't want people buying edibles in the black market because you don't know what's in them. And then the potency amount, you might not know. And the person may say it has this amount, but that person's not, that hasn't been tested by someone licensed to do that. So that is a concern. And I would support that issue. Again, we have probably about, realistically, if this were to become law, 2 years before this, you would have your first store open. That's something that I think once we get this plan open, I would certainly support changing that to allowing full recreational sale of edibles. Another support in regards to the medical community was to allow the ATCs to sell to the state, whether it's for cultivation purposes, to sell their products out of the state store. Now, to integrate those policies, we didn't really get a clear guidance from the ATCs on what would be best to do that without kind of handcuffing or harming their business. But what I would say is, again, by having them do that, those are clearly marked products. And I think that would be the direction to go. But again, if it's a deal breaker and this isn't going to get over the finish line, what's the point of all this? I didn't see the point of putting together a complicated bill that I didn't think would have a chance of passing.
So in your testimony, you said that the funds that would be taken aside, some would be used to mitigate the social impacts. Would you agree that legalization would in fact contribute to creating the social impacts that your money is going to try to mitigate?
So to say that having a recreational policy would have no negative social impact, I mean, I think alcohol has a negative social impact. So of course it's going to have some degree of negative social impact. All I'm saying is the difference between what we have with alcohol and what we have with cannabis now. I sat by the store in Salisbury, another town that's on the border of New Hampshire, might I add. All right, I was there on a family vacation, and I sat in that parking lot for about 30 minutes. Half the cars that pulled into that parking lot had New Hampshire plates. So my point is, we are dealing with the negative social impact. To the extent that you believe there's a negative social impact, whether it's you believe I'm not disputing that. All I'm saying is we're already dealing with a lot of the negative social impacts already. I don't know a single person that I've talked to that wants to purchase cannabis that doesn't know how to do it. All right, I'm 38 years old. I'll be 39 in November. When I was in high school, I knew exactly, if I wanted to purchase cannabis, I knew exactly where to go, and there was no retail stores. And that's just the matter. That was then. So I'm just being bluntly honest with everybody.
In the fiscal note, did your analysis compare any of the data from states that have legalized in developing either the revenue or the potential expense due to health impacts, both on the health care system and on individual medical conditions?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Sure. So two sides of the equation for revenues. Okay. First would be, how did you arrive at the revenue number that you've gotten? And then the second would be, in your computations of costs, if you did one, I'm not meaning to demean, did you look at the costs that other states are incurring subsequent to legalization, the per patient cost in emergency rooms, the types of things that are being that are happening to users?
I don't think the costs was really taken into consideration that detail. I think the cost really was just what would the state operating costs be, and what would the state expenditure be. Some of the impacts, whether it's medical, emergency rooms, those weren't really quantified in the cost side. In respect to the revenue side, I respect the work that the House Ways and Means Committee did. I didn't necessarily agree with the number they came up with because they were really taking into consideration other states and using the taxation model. Well, in New Hampshire, the product would be sold tax-free. So I'm not really sure how those two line up. What you really should be looking at is the gross sales. So when you look at the gross sales, is what I was really factoring in, and that's where I referenced HB 237 because that was another bill, even though that didn't make it out of the House. that at least had some fiscal estimates on the gross sales. So if you look at the gross sales and what the markup is for the flour alone, just the flour alone, again, you're looking at a 80% markup. All right, with give or take around a 50% profit margin, which is much, much higher than liquor. Liquor, your gross sales are $750 million, but your net revenue is around 175. And a lot of that is attributed to the, you're spending about $500 million a year on purchasing liquor, but that's because the markup's not as high. So you have a chance, if you can come close to matching that market, which some states have actually exceeded, the other states have been exceeding that amount. But I think you got to look at the gross sales, really, because we are going to be the retailer. The state would be the retailer. That's what needs to be focused on. So that's how you would come up with it, and then factor your profit margin from there.
So are you aware that in every state that is legalized, the black market has flourished? And if you get that 80% markup on your flours, that a black market would then say, with the same, they're either growing it themselves or importing it themselves, and they would just lower that margin, remain profitable, and compete, and ultimately steal market share from you as they do now.
So that, I agree 100%, because consistently, every state that has rolled out a recreational policy has seen a large increase in the black market. And the reason, one of the problems with that is that law enforcement are in a very difficult position now, because it's very difficult to establish probable cause on a product or on a substance that is legal under state law. How do you, it makes it much more difficult. So with that being said, the problem is that in the retail store in Massachusetts is an example, you're spending $350 for an ounce plus a 20% sales tax. So not everyone can even afford that. That's part of the problem, is that if people can't afford that price, that premium, yes, you're getting a clean product, I get all that, but if you can't afford that, if you can go to the person on the street corner that's selling it for $250, that's what people are going to do. The idea by not overtaxing it and having no taxes and keeping the price as low as possible, you're mitigating that, and you're in the best position you can be in to compete with that illegal market price. The idea is to compete with that price, not outprice yourself to the point that they're just running amok with things, which is what's happening virtually in every state around us.
So do you think that the state can set a price point that will compete with the black market? Or do you have any information to substantiate your thoughts?
My thought is, yes, they can, because again, if you're not going to overtax it, and if you can sell it at a lower price point, and again, if you're going to be getting individuals coming from surrounding states purchasing in bulk, like they do with liquor. I mean, if you go to the liquor store, they have sales. If you buy 12 bottles of wine, you get 15% off. I'm just using that same model here. And if you were able to do that, you can sell it and make a lower profit margin, but you're selling a larger volume of product. At that point, I think you can certainly be in that lower price point, because you're also buying in bulk, because you're not buying for just one retail store. You're buying throughout the entire state. So the more you buy, you can have a lower profit margin. Instead of having that 80% markup, you can get by on a 50%, 40% markup, but you're also selling 3, 4, 5 times the amount. So that was taken into consideration. And this was something that we talked about extensively when we were putting this together, was the quantity limit. The quantity limit is rather high. It's 4 ounces. And people say, how can it be that high? And I have concerns about having a high quality limit, but at the same time, if you want to encourage people who are coming from out of state to buy in bulk, well, I'm not sure if you limited it to 1 ounce and had a private store, that store would even be able to, in and of itself, sustain itself. I mean, what kind of regulation is that? You give someone a license to sell a product, then you limit how much they can sell and expect them to stay in business. I think they're going to have to raise the price. And then raising the price creates more opportunity for the black market. So this is the way to try to mitigate that as much as possible. I think we got to trust that liquor, their job would be to, if there is a black market, that is would be the liquor investigator, the liquor enforcement. Their job would be to address the black market, because if liquor's job selling this would be to make as much revenue for the state as possible. And if there's an illegal market share that's cutting into the potential for the state revenue, that's that's their duty and their job and responsibility to investigate that. And I believe they'll have the motivation to do it.
So I turn to our state constitution, stepping up to the 35,000 foot level, that looking what we're proposing is the first in the nation state-run dispensary for a controlled substance that's illegal in the eyes of the federal government. I find that to be, and I would ask if you agree, that it is in conflict with the statement in our Constitution that states, to countenance and inculcate the principles of humanity and general benevolence, public and private charity, industry and economy, honesty and punctuality, sincerity, sobriety, and all social affections and generous sentiments among the people. Do you find this bill to be in conflict with that constitutional principle?
If it is in conflict with that, which I don't find it to be, it's in no more conflict than liquor would be, in my opinion.
So would you say that your bill then is an attempt to add something that is known to be medically harmful, impacts the development of the human brain up to age 26, and you're saying that the state wants to be involved in establishing a system to provide this to its citizens? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that's what I want. So I don't think that's a fair characterization. As I opened my testimony, is that I'm not going to tell anyone to go watch all the floor speeches I gave in opposition to cannabis. I've been a strong advocate against the recreational policy, but what I look at this policy as, the polling data, you look at it, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And what would that policy look like? I'm not asking people to vote for this because they support a recreational policy. I'm just saying, if you had to pick one, which one would you pick? This is the one I would pick, whether it's against my will or not. I'm just explaining that this at least mitigates those negative impacts as much as possible. Because the other ones, I mean, you should see those billboards all along the interstate on 495, 95, 93, 387 stores in Massachusetts. That's the type of policy that HB 237 was pushing in this state. And that's what I'm concerned about. So I'm just saying, if it's going to happen, how would you do it to mitigate those as much as possible, especially if you can't stop it? And I'm looking at the voting, the votes in this House. I'm not clear that we can. It's going to be held off much longer. If this bill were to fail, and a policy similar to what you see under HB 237 with the sales tax and transfer tax were to become law 6 years from now, I think there's going to be a lot of people regretting that they didn't support 1598.
Any further questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. And if there's any other questions after this, please send me an email and I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you, Representative.
And if it would please, I can hand out the fiscal note for 237.
So I'm going to ask State Representative Tim Lang if he's here to come forward. He has a hearing, and I'm hoping that.
He may be over in the elevator.
All right, in which case we'll delay on him. Chief, we also have another time constraint. Chief John Bufonski. And given the number of people that are here to testify, I'm going to ask that people try to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Thank you, Chief. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You want to push the button so that get the red light and you'll be ready to rock. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be brief. I provided you by email a copy of the testimony from the...
Name, provide for the record, your name and position. For
Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
we need
My
to
name
do
is
that.
John Bufonski. I'm the Chief of Police in Bedford, New Hampshire, and I'm here representing the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police.
Thank you, Chief.
And we are in opposition to HB 1598. I'll be brief, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I have emailed you the copy of the testimony that I'll briefly summarize today, and a printed copy to save you and the state some money on paper. Our good friend, Representative Abbas, made a great argument against 1598 in a number of different areas. beginning with public health, which has already been an object of research for more than 20 years. If this were a criminal case, the judge would issue a directed verdict of guilty in essence, being this particular substance being known to produce significant public health costs. But one of the items that Representative Abbas brought to your attention, which is of deep concern to the New Hampshire Chiefs, is with respect to traffic and highway safety. There is no per se limit for intoxication by cannabis in the state of New Hampshire. My department, my traffic accident reconstruction unit, has investigated accidents, fatal accidents involving operators that had significant quantities of THC or tetrahydrocannabinol in their systems, well above the threshold limits set forth in the states that have legalized it. And yet here in New Hampshire, we cannot bring a charge of driving under the influence and impairment by cannabis as a result of our state law. So in only one particular area, transportation alone, HB 5098 is well ahead. The cart is well ahead of the horse in this particular area. So for transportation, and we've seen, as the testimony indicates, significant increases of traffic fatalities and collisions in Colorado, and the number of collisions involving impaired drivers in all the states that have legalized cannabis and commercialized it. I would also say that with respect to the federal issue, federal law still is prohibiting marijuana and cannabis as a Schedule I. And although it's going over to the Senate in Washington, D.C., there's an expectation that that bill will not pass in the U.S. Senate. So federal law continues to be prohibiting cannabis as a Schedule I narcotic. In addition, we see that there is, yes, we are surrounded by other states, but nothing in the world is inevitable, except for death and taxes, as they say. And so this is a choice that you, as members of the committee, and the good senators of this particular state have a choice to make with respect to whether or not commercialization of cannabis, a substance that is shown to have significant public health harm and effects for children, youth, adults, pregnant women, is something that the state wants to engage in. With respect to finance, there was testimony before the House Ways and Means by an esteemed member of the House that brought forth information with respect to the experimentation of the sale of cannabis on a commercial level by the province of Ontario, Canada. Canada being the country that has probably the best research and history with respect to the commercialization of cannabis. And that experiment failed miserably. The province of Ontario, which is a province much larger than the state of New Hampshire, lost a significant amount of money to the extent that they stopped that experiment after about 2 years. The cost of regulation in this particular case and legislation, the state would be responsible for selling a product. And the state, as a responsible agent, needs to ensure that that product is free of diluents and other material that are harmful beyond the substance itself to the public. The cost of regulation is not well defined, if at all, in HB 5098, and it's significant. So with all that said, I would ask that the committee consider the cost of cannabis legalization that we've estimated to cost the state of New Hampshire more than $80 million on an annual basis, above what it costs already today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any members with questions of the Chief? Hearing none, thank you very much. I'm going to call Representative Patabrami. He's speaking in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, State Rep. Patabrami, Rockingham 19 Stratham, and as you mentioned, I am going to be speaking against. And I'm also the vice chair of Ways and Means on the House side. So we had a very close look at this bill. When it came out of criminal justice, it passed on the floor by a 2-to-1 vote. But after we got done with this bill, it only passed by 13 votes on the floor. We spent a lot of time really looking at what the revenues would be, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. Also, my other hat is that I had the honor of chairing the Marijuana Commission, which generated a report back in November 1st of 2018. In that report, we created 54 recommendations. If the state of New Hampshire were to do this, this is the way it should be done. And let me give you some highlights of that report. One is that no way did we contemplate this kind of a model that's being proposed here, that the state would run the liquor stores. We did hear testimony. I was able to bring in the Liquor Commission who testified, and they said, no way do we want cannabis sold in our stores. Now, this bill doesn't say that. The sponsor bill was smart enough to know that would not fly, and that we're talking about stores that would be storefronts, pretty much, because you don't need big space for a marijuana store. So at that time, they didn't want to even touch this. And I would speculate that today, they don't really want to touch this either. This is not their mainstream, but they will never get up here and testify that they will not do it because they're good soldiers. And if the legislature says do it, they will do it. But my sense is that's not what they really want. Another thing that we found in the commission was that 13 to 16% of adults over 21 actually partake in marijuana. So all the advertising in the world, and one thing that our Liquor Commission does well is they know retail really well. They could probably make this work, but they can't advertise the way they advertise because we advertise a lot across state lines because, as we all know, we want to attract business from other states for our liquor stores. But they can't do that. It's a bad look. It's against, we talked about it being against federal law. That would say, well, we know it's illegal you could buy it in New Hampshire, but it's illegal to take that product that bought in New Hampshire and tip it to Massachusetts or whatever state. So we can't really advertise. And I brought this out and the Liquor Commission agrees that that's the case. So that would hurt them. We can't treat it like alcohol sales is what I'm getting at. And the other thing that the Liquor Commission talked about, and we all agreed, and there was 18 members on this commission, some for, some against, all walks of life, all different facets of government and industry that were on this commission. And the one thing we all agreed is not to legalize for the money. We interviewed the 8 states that had legalized. We used Skype at the time. I don't think, and we Skyped them in from Oregon and Washington State, California, Hawaii. And they all said that to us. Don't do it for the money because what happens is we're not going to have tax in this bill, but taxes always increase because people get greedy and legislators get addicted to the money that comes from marijuana sales. But what I really want to talk about is that this is a bad model for the state. We're basically going to set up the Liquor Commission for failure here. And I'll make 8 points to that. First, they asked for over 14 million in startup money. It was a couple of million above. I can't recall now, but in the original bill, it was 14 million. When this bill came over to Ways and Means, we asked 3 members of finance to sit with us during the hearings because they couldn't have another hearing, and we had one from Commerce because of the bank. There was the banking that we took out. There was a provision that we'd start a state bank. We took that out in Ways and Means. So what from 14 million, what finance and our House was only willing to give them 4.6 million for startup. So basically, we're going to undercapitalize them from the very beginning. And that would mean that the rollout would be very slow. It would be maybe 3 stores the first year, and then whether or not the state gives them more money to capitalize, we don't know, but the one thing that was said in Ways and Means is that we rely on the first stores to fund the next set of stores, meaning that there'd be very little revenue that would be actually going to what I would call profits that would be coming back to the state. So that was very, very clear in Ways and Means, that discussion. The whole issue of edibles, and you heard that there's no edibles in this bill, which is basically tying the hands of, I can't imagine any recreational store in a free market model that wouldn't have edibles. We estimated about 40% of the sales would be edibles if we would allow that. But not only, then it gets even more convoluted. Not allowing edibles, but if you have an ATC card, if you have a therapeutic card, you can buy edibles. Now, how does that work? So I think you bring in customers to your state store, retail store, and they say, well, I want to buy those edibles that are over here on that shelf. No, you can't. You have an ATC card. No, we don't. So how's that going to work? You're going to upset the customers, and they're going to go buy their edibles either on the black market, or they're going to go where they go now, possibly in other states, and buy the edibles. So that's a real problem. I mean, we talked about it in Ways and Means to try to get rid of it, but then we decided, look, that's a policy decision that came out of criminal justice. We just let it alone. But it's really unworkable. And the other thing you're going to probably hear testimony from is that this will place our state stores in direct competition with our ATCs. And guess what's going to happen? And you're going to hear testimony, I'm sure, today about this, that people are going to go where the price is less. And the ATCs really do feel that they're going to be at a real competitive disadvantage by allowing the bill the way it is. Then without edibles, which is the mainstay of manufacturing, so there's cultivators that are going to grow, that's going to be private, then there's going to be manufacturers that are going to manufacture all these different products. So how are we going to attract manufacturers to the state to say, but by the way, 40%, there's you're not going to be able to sell your manufactured products to our stores. But by the way, if you open a business here, you can't sell them to other stores in other states because it's federally illegal. So that's a problem. I don't know how. I'm just trying to point out some things that would really.
In the interest of time, Representative, your testimonies, can you try to just truncate?
Okay.
Get to the main points. Thanks.
Well, those okay. Right. Most of these businesses are vertically integrated, so that recreational stores, they grow, they manufacture, and they sell. In this model, our stores are not. We're not going to be able to produce profits that will go to the state from the growing part and from the. So that's a problem. We talked about the opt-out provision. The liquor doesn't have an opt-out or an opt-in provision. If they want to build a store somewhere, they build a store somewhere. Now there's ordinances, but there's no opt-in or opt-out provision for our liquor stores. So this would be something new for Liquor Commission. And it'll be hard for the Liquor Commission to find storefronts and plazas. There's a difference in terms of how alcohol is viewed versus cannabis is viewed. And there'll be many plazas that are going to say, no way, that would put a liquor store, but they would not put one of these cannabis stores. So that's a variable as well. And the big thing is that when it comes to the maximum revenue, the Liquor Commission estimated 50 million, and that's the maximum. No matter how much advertising you're going to do or whatever, because there's about 13 to 16%, like I said, of people will partake. You're not going to increase that market. You're just not going to increase it. So we had estimated, they had estimated 50 million, and it's interesting enough, in the Marijuana Commission, we estimated about 50 million as well in profits. So in potential revenue to the state. But in Ways and Means, we took that and we said, well, no edibles, that's 40%. Actually, the state's it's only gonna recognize about 30 million in profits. And to put that in context,
In gross revenues, 30 million in gross revenue.
net profit, what goes to the,
Okay.
let's just say to the general fund. Okay, that's it, 30 million, not gross, net. And to put that in perspective, liquor last year gave us 163 million net back to the state. Now, some of that goes to the alcohol fund, whatever, treatment fund. But when you add that back in, it's about 163 million. And one last thought was mentioned earlier about Quebec and Ontario. Yes, Ontario's given up. When Canada legalized, they gave the provinces the choice. Either you can run the stores yourself, run the whole process yourself, or you can, commercialize it. And Ontario and Quebec both said, well, we're going to do it. Ontario's given up. Quebec is right behind. They're about to give up. And they're just going to say, let's give it to the free market to do. So now I will say that our liquor commission does have the experience. They know how to run a store. They know stores. They know how to do all that. So let me have 4 final thoughts real quick. We've heard, well, all the other states are doing it. Well, guess what? Only 18 states have done legalized and commercialized. That means 32 states haven't, and we're being one of them. So what can be sold in our stores still? Flour, which is loose cannabis. Okay, edibles are out and ingestibles. But cartridges are which the jewel-like things, instead of having the vape, the tobacco in it, the nicotine in it, it'll have THC in it. And this is a favorite of our kids. You get the little cassette, and those could be sold in our stores. Concentrates, and I want to make this point. Concentrates, which is the worst of all. So they extract the THC, they create these waxes. They call it dabbing. You take a little piece of the wax, you put it on a heat source, and it's sublimation. It goes from solid to vapor. Okay, and that's 94%. Some of those come up to 94% THC. But we're going to sell this, but we're not going to sell edibles. There's no restriction on this, and it's sold. Every state sells this stuff. So it's a real problem. To me, it's a hard drug when it's that. They also can sell pre-rolls, which are
1 minute.
Okay, thanks. They can also sell pre-rolls, which are joints made, and topicals. So there's ointments you can put on your skin and absorb through your skin, and then accessories that can be sold. As I mentioned, out of criminal justice, the bill passed 64% on the floor, 2-to-1 vote, unbelievable. But then when it came after Ways and Means, it was only 52% yes, and because we told the real story. People thought they were going to get all this revenue, and they're not. Okay. And my final closing thought, my remark is that do we really want our liquor commission to take the eye off the ball, which is their good job of selling liquor? I think we're putting them in a really bad spot with no guarantee that this model will be successful. Thank you.
Any questions for Representative Abrami? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. Can you go into a little bit more details? You said net $30 million to the state. Does that include the upfront costs that would have to be paid back from the fund, and also the approximately $8.5 million of operational and personnel costs and the cost of the product?
It's just like liquor right now, liquor sales, right? They have the stores, there's the cost of the product, the cost of the staff, and all the same thing. After all of that, so it's basically, let's say the liquor commission is a for-profit business. So what I'm talking about is the profit of that business. So after all expenses, and in this case, yes, they would have to pay back the 4.6 million. And actually, the 4.6 million is a loan from from the state to the liquor commission, if you will, in those kind of terms, that would be paid back. So it's just the same.
So Representative, so if 30 million is the net, what's the gross? Do you have a figure?
No, well, I don't know. It's been said that it's like about 250 million.
That would be out of 13 to 16% of our population.
Right, right. That's not my number. That was what Representative Abbott said to us in the Ways and Means Committee. I didn't verify that number. Yeah.
So follow up, Mr. Chair.
Please.
So when looking at the proportioning of what the remaining amount in the fund goes to, 10% of the remaining funds or $25 million, whichever is less. So 10% of the remaining funds, are you saying that the remaining funds would be $30 million? So 10% would be $3 million that go to DHHS
Yeah, right.
instead of 25?
Right.
Thank
Right.
you.
That's the point. You got it. I mean, it's not much. And that's the point we want to make here, or at least I want to make, so.
Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
It was very helpful. Representative Lang here. Nope,
Do we have an updated fiscal note, Mr. Chair, that gives us some of this information?
I'm not aware of one. Do we have one? All right, on the mic.
So, Mr. Chair, my amended fiscal note is 311, and it says, as amended by the House. I'm not sure which amendment they're referring to, but it still references the state bank. So I don't know that this is the most recent, or it could be the most recent, but I don't know if it's up to date.
So are we looking for the most current? Is that,
Thank you.
okay. Representative Lang, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Representative Tim Lang. I am a three-term state representative. I currently serve as the chairman of the House Fish and Game Committee. I also serve on the Ways and Means Committee, hence why I'm here, and I serve on JALCAR. The reason I'm here for the Ways and Means Committee is that I was the one that did the major amendment in the Ways and Means Committee in the House to modify the underlying original bill, specifically around the revenue distribution and revenue projection conversation. And so I felt it was best to come before you to answer. I'll run quickly through some of the major changes that were made under the underlying bill. Representative Brahmi was right. We changed the definition.
Representative, if I could ask you, could you provide us with a list of assumptions before you start getting into the specifics? What were the assumptions?
Sure, the conversation, what the monies look like, right, so,
Sure.
thank you. So, the Liquor Commission came in with the projected, based on 10 stores, of approximately $250 million in revenue. Of that $250 million in revenue, $50 million would be considered profit, the gross profit of the operation. Of that $50 million, again, I was just about to talk about the cannabis product definition, depending on how you defined edibles, that would accommodate up to about 40% of the revenue. So that revenue would all be dropped by 40% because we weren't going to be selling revenues. However, we modified the language of what an edible was to mainly take care of things like gummies, candies, brownies, and infused drinks, right? Those were considered edibles, and we took that out. We left things in like vapes, ointments, tinctures, those kind of things. So that changed the revenue projection because we went from what we were originally talking about, a 40% loss in revenue, to not having the edibles based on the definition of edible products down to 20%. So the revenues now we were estimating at $40 million gross annually. It was the profit annually. So $40 million per year. That was based on 10 stores. One of the major changes we made in this bill was we changed the amount of money we gave liquor to be able to roll out stores. So we modified it down from the $15 million was the original ask to throw up 10 stores all at once. And even liquor agreed they couldn't do that. And so we dropped that down to $4.6 million basically to give them the seed money to open the first stores that they need. And that was done as a loan. A provision of the disbursement is that they pay back that loan to the general fund and to the citizens of New Hampshire within 5 years of the first store opening. There's a specific date in the bill. So I'll go back on cannabis products. If you look on page 3 of the bill, it talks about the fact that we excluded, for the purpose of this paragraph, cannabis products shall not include cannabis-infused food or drink products, including but not limited to cannabis-infused edibles such as candies, gummies, brownies, cookies, or cannabis-infused alcoholic or non-alcoholic drinks or beverages of any kind. So we took that out, and again, that was, to Daryl Abbas's, Representative Abbas's point is that if we're going to do this, let's baby step into it. And edibles was a major concern for a lot of people about the availability, the way it looks, and those kind of things. And so, in an abundance of caution, we took those items out and said, let's see what it looks like first. And then, if down the road a future legislature wants to change that, it's a nice, easy place. They can make a single amendment by striking a single line, and edibles would be taken care of. The next place I point your attention to in the amendment was we looked around the area of the regulations of cannabis, and we were discussing the health and safety aspects for the consumer and the product that was being produced. So we added some language in around testing and labeling. So again, in testing and labeling, we make on line 18 of page 6, or line 16 of page 6, we talk about health and safety rules, including regarding the packaging and preparing of cannabis products, presence of contaminant, looking for contaminants, and restricting use of pesticides that may be dangerous to consumers, cannabis consumers. So there were several places, again, under number 9, the labeling requirements. We mandate the disclosure of the contents, requiring the package ensure it's not designed to appeal to minors, establishing the amount of THC to be included in each serving. And then number 10 is requiring testing of all cannabis products for potency and contaminants. So these are consumer safety provisions that were added to the bill in the House Ways and Means Committee. There's a provision you don't see in this chapter at all, and that was relative to a state bank. The original bill had the possible creation of a state bank, but through talking to the Banking Commission and the New Hampshire Banking Association, it was realized that was not necessary in any way, shape, or form. And not only that, $15 million, I think it was $10 million they put in there, was way underfunded. It was going to be closer to $50 million to start a state bank, and it would need a constant infusion of cash if we did that. So that provision was completely taken and struck from the bill. The other change we made was on page 7 of line 31, and we recognized that we were going to be in competition with the treatment centers, the medical treatment centers. And so by here, we learned from the Banking Association that a not-for-profit organization can have a for-profit organization as a sub-owned company. And so here we give the ATCs a chance to create that for-profit funding and be able to sell to the state, both become a cultivator, a manufacturer, as well as a transporter in a for-profit model. And the idea was this would make up for any potential lost revenues for the state now managing and opening these liquor stores. We get down into the money. So if we start with $50 million, we take off the 20%, which brings us to $40 million. Of that $40 million, the estimate to run 10 stores was around $3.5 million from the state liquor store. So $3.5 million would come off every annual year going on. The first year was projected because we're doing a slow ramp up. And the idea was they could use the profits they made to open the next stores, not need another infusion of cash by the taxpayers. Just like any other business does, it starts its model and it uses its profits to be able to open its next stores and expand its business. We follow that same basic model. We allow liquor to use the revenues from the first years in the first 3 or 4 stores they open to open up their future stores. After opening up the stores, we require that by 2027 that the $4.6 million initial startup grant that was given to them, the loan, I should say, that was given to them is paid back to the general fund and to the taxpayer. Of the monies that are left, after you've paid the operational expense and after you've paid back the citizens for the startup costs, the money starts getting split up. That's what I consider the net revenue of this process. In the net revenue, Ways and Means, we decided if we were going to do this, the taxpayer needs to see a direct benefit. And so the first thing we do is we allot 50% of all the funds to the Education Trust Fund for the purposes of driving down the swept portion of the Education Trust Fund requirement. So the $3.63 million we collect, and that's on the last page, and we can get to that, but to where we put the language in to make it specific to the swept, to $3.63 million. But the 50% of the net profits will go to the Education Trust Fund. 30%, again, thinking back about what's going to best help our citizens, 30% of the remaining funds will be distributed to the Department of Administrative Services and credited to the New Hampshire retirement system debt, the $9 billion in debt we have right now due to the mismanagement of the retirement system. The idea is the faster we can drive that down, every single town will pay less in retirement costs, because the percentage will drop for every single town and every single employee. So every state and town employee will see a pay raise because the percentage needed to pay into the retirement system will drop, and the percentage of the town needs to contribute will also drop. 10% or $25 million would go to the Department of Health and Human Services to assist with alcohol and drug cessation programs. It's 10% or $25 million, whichever is less. 5%, recognizing that law enforcement is going to have an increased workload. I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I was very lucky that I got to go to lots of training, so I was a drug recognition expert. And for prosecuting these type of cases, one of the most important things a police officer needs to know is the ability to articulate what they saw and the ability to document what they saw to support a case of DWI, in this case, driving under the influence. If a police officer doesn't have the training necessary to be able to articulate and document those steps that made them arrest the person for DUI based on drugs, it's going to make it hard for prosecution. So we put 5% of the funds away to enhance training for law enforcement, be able to get these more officers trained and pay for that training. The last 5% was put in for children's mental health services through DHHS. So that's the distribution of the funds after we've paid for everything, paid for it back. And then the last piece I was going to talk about is at the very last page of the bill. Again, we reduced it to 4.6 from the original $15 million ask. And then that last page where it says taxation, education tax, this is where we talk specifically about the fact that 50% of net revenue made from the marijuana sales will go directly to the citizens and every single taxpayer through a reduction in the amount of money we collect every year through the statewide property tax. They'll be offset. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
And you did that all in one breath.
I'm from Jersey, and I tend to be that way. And I'm one of 9 kids, so if I didn't talk fast and didn't have a quick fork, I didn't eat and I didn't talk. So,
Any questions? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. Good to see you. A few questions on your portioning out of the net proceeds. Why did you choose, or the sponsor choose to reduce SWEPT rather than increase adequacy aid?
So again, the idea was that we wanted to make sure that every citizen saw a benefit from this, every statewide property taxpayer. By adding to the adequacy aid, there's no guarantee on the local side that that's going to change the property tax at all. So we can increase the adequacy aid, but there's no guarantee that a local board would actually pass that savings down to the local taxpayer. The only way we saw we could actually direct every single citizen, again, every single property taxpayer, was to directly affect the SWEPT tax, which is the only place in our entire state that we actually tax all citizens.
Follow up. So I see A, which is the 50% reduction in SWEPT, 30% of the remaining funds dispersed to the balance, the unfunded balance in the retirement system. That being 80%, and then 10% going to DHHS, another 5% going to DHHS, and 5% of the remaining funds going to law enforcement. I don't see anything in here that goes to the municipalities that will have these facilities, because A and B could help municipalities, but not necessarily target the municipalities that will have one of these 10 locations open their community and the resulting effects that may happen in their community, which I think we could have HHS come in here and tell us all what those might be, and law enforcement personnel as well. Why did you not include funds specifically targeted to the communities that will have these facilities?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So the answer is we followed the liquor model. We don't currently do that with liquor sales. If a town happens to host a state liquor store, we don't give that town extra money from the profits of the liquor store because they got to deal with the traffic and everything else for that liquor store. So we stuck as close as we can to that model and not deviate from that model. And just as an aside, again, it's probably it's the first time I've asked this question or this idea, is that I'd be concerned about doing those kind of things because, you know, we had a bill in House Ways and Means that wanted to look at the rooms and meals tract distribution and changing that based on revenue and generation. And I think that opens a really bad precedent to do that kind of carve out for municipalities that have state-run agencies within their confines, jurisdiction.
Follow up on a different track. Would you believe the constituents that have talked to me about this bill are disappointed to find out that edibles are not in there because they don't want to smoke something or use an alternative method that's in here? But also that my district goes along the Vermont border and the Canadian border and the Maine border, which they could soon to Vermont, you can cross and get these products. So why, other than the reasons given, why would we not entertained putting edibles in one of these locations, other than if you have a card for medical, which would then be in competition with our medical facilities that we already have, our ATCs?
Thank you, Senator. And I guess the only answer I have is crawl before you walk, walk before you run. So I think that by allowing this legalization and this form of legalization, that we're taking a baby step towards this. We stop arresting our citizens, which in the Ways and Means Committee, we talked about the what and the how, right? So the what is, what are we trying to accomplish? We want to stop arresting our citizens and ruining people's lives for the possession of marijuana or use of marijuana, right? So if that's the what, then we're only arguing about the how. How do we get about doing that? And this how I felt was a good baby step. It can easily, again, because of the way we define that cannabis product statute, we can easily adjust it in the next term if we feel it's not been a problem and we want to add edibles and allow that. So again, we're looking at taking a baby step towards this and not taking the full leap to try to get into the end zone on the first.
All right, I'm going to ask the representative to condense his answers because we are running way short.
Will do, Senator.
Yeah. Any further questions?
I do, related to charitable trust, and I don't know if you can answer it. I'm just wondering if you consulted the charitable trust division when you allowed an ATC to create a for-profit within their not-for-profit and looked at what those regulations would be in New Hampshire.
So I did not directly ask them that question. OLS looked at it and said that based on the 126 statute, this would be allowed.
Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senators.
Next up, we'll have Representative Sue Hamola. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all to the committee members for hearing my testimony today. The purpose of my testimony today is to highlight my concerns regarding HB 1598. The first intent of this...
Can you pull the mic closer, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
The first intent of this bill is to legalize recreational marijuana. It does this despite nearly 10 years worth of data from other states, which documents how legalization in their states has led to a marked increase in underage marijuana use, a doubling of marijuana-related traffic deaths, an immediate rise in child welfare cases, and infants being born with THC present in their bloodstream, and a marked uptick in hospital-documented mental illness crisis response events in teens and young adults. Here in New Hampshire, we're already dealing with our own public health crisis, as drug overdoses in Nashua and Manchester alone increased by 110% in this past year when compared to overdose rates in 2020. Given this trend and our state's tragic history as being one of the hardest hit by the opioid epidemic, we cannot afford to make this issue worse. The second intent of this bill is to invest over $14 million in startup costs to establish state-run pot shops with $5 million in projected annual operating costs. Canada has in fact tried a state provincial run model, and the effort failed at great cost to the taxpayer. The Canadian government gave the provinces two options: provide private retail sales or run their own state-run option. Both Quebec and Ontario set up state-run shops. Quebec is still struggling, but Ontario has already given up. According to the Canadian Broadcast Corporation news report, in 2019, the Ontario Retail Corporation racked up $106 million in expenses, but only made $64 million in profits, resulting in a loss of $42 million to its taxpayers. This morning I had emailed you all the testimony that I'm providing today, but I also emailed you the House Ways and Means testimony that I provided regarding Canada, because it had some informational links that you can cross-check my references in the information I'm providing. One of the main selling points being touted about this bill is the amount of revenues we expect to earn from selling pot to our citizens. And it's important to note that in every state which has legalized marijuana, the revenues from such sales have come in below expected projections, and they usually represent a very small portion of the state's budget. One of the things I would like to go off script about and talk is just very briefly mention edibles, because it was just mentioned a minute ago. Are we in this room aware that on our medical alternative treatment centers, that currently you can buy edibles that are upwards of 90% THC? THC levels, actually, the human body cannot process THC. At a certain point, it just stores in the fat of the human body, and it starts to poison the person. Vermont Public Health actually recently put out, not Vermont Public Health, one of their major insurance brokers has just put out an announcement to citizens that they're seeing a huge uptick in actual marijuana or THC poisoning events. And what happens when a person is being poisoned by THC, it can lead to uncontrolled vomiting for up to a week, that there's nothing you can do about it other than put somebody in a hot bath. So this is happening right now in Vermont. So buyer beware with regard to edibles. That's all I wanted to say about that. Some of the most disheartening testimony that I've actually heard on this bill was on the House floor recently. And there was a proponent of this bill that touted how marijuana profits from this bill could be used for school funding, more money for cops, and drug treatment programs. But I ask you this: what good is more money for schools when we are passing a bill that'll lead to increased drug exposure to children? What good is more money for cops when we ourselves will make their job exponentially harder by putting more drugs on the street? And what is good about more money for drug treatment if we ourselves are responsible for increasing the epidemic of addiction? The financial promises sound very hollow when they come at the expense of public health, and I'd just like to make this last point. In our state, we have already legalized medical marijuana and decriminalized recreational use. There's absolutely no reason we need to rush into full legalization, and we need to end to be responsible for its commercial enterprise. The only logical explanation as to why we are even having this conversation comes down to this: those who seek full legalization are never satisfied with targeted solutions. The legalization lobby playbook has always been to normalize the widespread use of marijuana by first focusing on the speculative health benefits, touting social injustice of criminal usage, and also touting the social injustice of criminal usage. While these are important discussions, it seems to be that New Hampshire has already addressed them. And go figure, it's not enough. Given what we know about drug legalization lobby efforts that have already overwhelmed 18 other states, do we really believe that passing HB 1598 will put an end to this discussion? It won't. Because when your main selling point for drug policy is the promise of untold millions in profit, despite the documented harmful effects on vulnerable populations, then it merely paves the way for legalization of other drugs if the profit margins are attractive. Make no mistake, this conversation won't end by passing HB 1598. It will open the door to a whole new conversation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from members of the committee? Representative, are you aware of the costs of any of the hyperemesis issues in emergency rooms in other states that have legalized?
I'm not aware of the cost of those, other than if somebody is actually taken into the ER and admitted back home, or if they have to be under observation. I'm not aware. I just know that in doing this research, that was something I was surprised to see, because Vermont had recently put this out as a growing problem in their state.
Would you believe that in the bill that was presented several years ago, 2 years ago to the Senate, the research from the state of Colorado showed an average cost per case of $6,300 for cannabis use disorder when in admissions in emergency rooms? Would you
Yes.
believe?
Oh, yes, sir, I would. And as a matter of fact, we need to look no further than Colorado right now, who has, in the last year, tried to claw back and actually do some studies on the harmful effects of what THC poisoning has done and what the social impacts have been to their citizens. I completely believe that. And like I said, Colorado, we need to look no further than Colorado. That's why I'm just dumbfounded as to why we are not letting these social experiments play out in other states and seeing how they have to pick up their pieces before we even engage in a bill on our own and have a state-run pot shop option.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Devin Chaffee from the ACLU of New Hampshire is up speaking in favor. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and turn on the, there you go.
Is that better?
That's way better. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chairman Gaida, and thank you other honorable members of the committee. For the record, my name is Devin Chaffee, and I am the Executive Director of the ACLU of New Hampshire. And I'm here to testify in support of HB 1598. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is the perfect bill. If we at the ACLU of New Hampshire had a magic wand or had some kind of mind control over the members of the U.S. House of Representatives, which I can assure you we do not, the bill would look much different. But what I will tell you is that we are done waiting for the perfect bill on this issue. The New Hampshire legislature has been debating the issue of legalization for the entire decade that I have been working with members of the New Hampshire legislature. It's been over 10 years that we've been discussing this issue. Over these 10 years, we have seen dozens of states across the country, including all of the states throughout New England, adopt legalization and move forward. These states that have adopted legislation, their bills were not perfect. As they move forward, they tweaked their legislation, they made changes to their regimes, but it didn't prevent them from moving forward on what is a very serious issue. And I will tell you that in these states, well, every state has tweaked and every state has made refinements and every state has changed regulation. Not a single state that has adopted legalization has reversed that policy change. The sky did not fall in these states. There was no reefer madness. And you can't call it an experiment anymore. When there have been dozens of years in which these policies have been implemented in other states, it's no longer an experiment. We know that the worst case scenario that has been described by opponents of legalization simply have not come to pass in these states. And I will also say that during the past 10 years, public support in New Hampshire among constituents, among your constituents who you represent, has increased significantly. It's gone from like barely over 50% of Granite Staters supporting legalization to 74% of Granite Staters supporting legalization. And this is independent of party, whether you are a Democrat, whether you are a Republican, whether you are an independent, overwhelmingly Granite Staters support legalization. Over 10 years, the New Hampshire Senate has been looking for the perfect solution on this issue. And what I want to say today is that it is past time for this body, for the New Hampshire Senate, to act on this issue. You know, a lot of people have made a lot of the fact that today is 420, which is supposed to be some kind of significance, I guess. I don't really know the ins and outs of the meaning there.
1 minute.
Yes, sir. But I know that you all understand that this is a very serious and a very important issue. The current law in New Hampshire has the ability to ruin lives. We are talking about over 1,000 people that are arrested annually in New Hampshire for cannabis-related crimes. And this has implications for their entire life: housing, financial aid, child custody. It is a monumental waste of taxpayer dollars. In 2017, law enforcement still arrested over 1,400 people. I'm sorry, in 2020, law enforcement arrested over 1,400 people, and it cost New Hampshire close to $3.25 million each year to enforce our current marijuana laws. And also, it is enforced with staggering bias. In 2020, Black people were 4.8 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession when compared to whites. 4.8 times. That's the disparity in marijuana enforcement. And all of the fear-based rhetoric, if I may, very quickly, Chair, all of this fear-based rhetoric, and I will pass out my written testimony, which is very well cited with studies that show that there has been no significant effect on traffic accidents or fatalities, that there has been no rise in child use rates in states that have legalized marijuana. All of this fear-based rhetoric has proven not to be the reality. It is not supported by reality. And so I'm simply urging you today, please, as you move forward, whether it's members of this committee on this bill or members of the larger Senate, it's time to act on this issue. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. And let me just say up front that my son works for her organization. But I have a question. Isn't there another bill that would legalize cannabis and allow home grow? So isn't this not our only option if we were to agree with you that it's a social justice issue? Isn't there another bill that's also in the Senate?
That's correct, Senator. There is another bill. I believe that bill is coming to the floor of the Senate tomorrow. The number of that bill, I'm sorry, it is escaping me. It is 629. Thank you very much. 629. It's coming to the, I believe it's coming to the floor of the Senate tomorrow. And I will say, from the ACLU of New Hampshire's perspective, we are not concerned with the way in which you implement it. Any issues with any bill can be fixed down the line. It's really time to move on this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would remind you, out of a sense of respect for the peers in the House and Senate, that for 10 years, this legislature has rejected every proposal for the legalization of marijuana except medical and the 3/4 of an ounce limit. And they did that not because of any concern of specious data, but after reviewing hundreds of pages of information, reading books, talking to legislators from other states, talking to doctors, PhDs, MDs, and so forth, psychiatrists, importing them here for testimony. And so to suggest that this legislature is non-responsive or irresponsible, I would submit is out of order. Thank you. Paul Morissette, please. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Paul Morissette. I'm here to be the industry rep for adult use. I'm a partner in East Coast Cannabis. We have 2 retail stores in Elliott, Maine and Lebanon, Maine. We're vertically integrated. We've got 3 20,000 square foot grow licenses, and we have 2 unlimited manufacturing licenses. And
So just 3 minutes is what we're asking, because I've got 3 pages of people.
oh God, I got a 5-minute. I'll get through what I can.
Thank you.
Everyone mistakenly believes the cannabis industry is a gold rush. Evidently, the state Senate agrees by considering this bill. Let's start by looking at the stock history of the biggest cannabis players. Canopy Holdings off 85%, Acreage Holdings off 80%, MaryMed Advisors 74 cents a share from $5 off 85%.
We're asking you to speak to the merits of the bill.
Okay,
not a-
structurally, I apologize. Structurally, in the cannabis industry, this model submitted in this bill simply won't work. Not just the fact it will be challenging to make a profit for the state, but worse, the supply chain of products won't work. Here's why. The bill proposes 15 private licensed state cultivators to grow the cannabis products for the 10-state store. I have spoken with 10 successful commercial cannabis cultivators in Maine and Mass, including our company, but not one of us would accept a contract to cultivate with the state of New Hampshire under this bill unless the state agreed to buy our entire crop, regardless if the state stores are overstocked or the state buyer doesn't want the product or for any other reason. We cannot grow expensive crops for the state that if the state buyer doesn't want to buy those crops for any reason, we will have to pay to destroy what we just paid millions of dollars to grow, since the state is the only buyer. Who would spend millions to set up cultivation businesses for the state, only to have to potentially destroy what you just spent millions to grow? No one. But on the other hand, if the state agrees to buy all products grown, they will be the ones with millions in spoiled crops they have to pay to destroy, which of course will bankrupt the entire program. Also, what a cannabis cultivation gets paid for the product and what sets the market price is state by state. And prices are determined by state supply and demand and two-way negotiations between countless buyers and sellers, just like the Liquor Commission buys all of their liquor. But this bill instead proposes a single state-approved buyer to negotiate and state buying prices for any and all quantities of the product. That model is untenable to the cultivator, since the fate of their expensive crop and the price and terms are going to be dictated by their only state buyer, who also controls the renewal of their license. That is in no way a free and open market and won't work in a free and open market. I am a New Hampshire licensed and bonded auctioneer in business for 35 years. You can't have an auction with one buyer because they always bid $1. The next issue is the bill only allows cannabis flower to be sold in the state, but cannabis-infused products, which won't be legal for the state, adult state use, represent about half of all adult use retail stores sales. It is like having a bar that doesn't sell beer. Worse, cannabis plant trim and substandard cannabis flower have their oils extracted and made into cannabis-infused products. This accounts for about 50% of the cannabis products sold in retail stores. A large jar of cannabis oil is worth $10,000. But this bill specifically excludes the legalization of infused cannabis products to the adult use market, thereby robbing the state stores of 50% of their gross sales and bankrupting all of the cultivators, because the most expensive product they produce that makes up 50% of the cannabis products sold in retail stores will have to be paid to get destroyed by the cultivator, because it is illegal to sell except to the state, something the bill's author nor the state was even aware of, I'm sure. The budget. We have serious budgetary concerns. We've reviewed the budget in the bill to see how accurate the numbers proposed match what we know are the costs. We believe that the authors of the budget erroneously contort their experience with alcohol and erroneously apply it to adult use cannabis market, which they obviously know nothing about. But alcohol and cannabis aren't simple at all. The State Liquor Commission buys alcohol from distributors who sell and warehouse it all over the U.S. There is a whole distribution network and standard wholesale pricing, and the prices are set by the seller, who knows what his costs are, not the sole buyer looking to get the best price, who has all the power to set the price. Here's a couple examples to show you how inaccurate the budget is. The budget for each state store to buy the beginning inventory is $70,000 for each state store. We opened an adult use retail store in Lebanon literally weeks ago, Lebanon, Maine, recently, and it was $250,000 for our beginning inventory, not 70. The budget also doesn't take into account that each New Hampshire town and city has an opt-out provision, making it impossible to judge revenue without having an idea until past which towns or cities even participate in allowing a retail store. The last important issue about this budget is it doesn't take into account that cannabis prices will decrease as more states legalize and more cannabis grows materialize in the U.S. Mass is already dropping, went from $4,500 a pound 3 months ago to $3,400 a pound right now for adult use cannabis. There is countless other problems with this bill, which I could spend hours identifying. Senators, please vote against this dangerous bill. And I'm a proponent of cannabis legalization, obviously. This is a poison pill that won't work, okay, and very dangerous.
I'm grateful for your efforts to condense into 3 minutes, and I think you did it.
I'm an auctioneer. So, any questions? And thank you for listening.
I would note that on the sign-up sheet, you are marked as speaking in favor. I would imagine that
I know, I'm against.
Change that.
I'm a little up close. I forgot my reading glasses, you know.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Morissette? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator, for listening. Thanks for listening.
It's James Norris here from the New Hampshire State Patrol. Nope. Okay, we'll space so. Dr. Joe Ebner. My grandson doesn't remember you, but his mother does.
Thank you, Senator Gaida and fellow senators, for giving me a few minutes today to talk as an obstetrician and my experience with marijuana. My name is Joe Ebner, and I have been practicing obstetrics for more than 25 years. And at the end of my brief testimony, I also would like to read two brief testimonies from two other physicians in New Hampshire. So let me just start by saying what a true blessing it is to be an obstetrician. We're there at that moment when those two individuals become a family. And it's truly a blessed moment for me and something that I really appreciate. And it's what keeps doctors and midwives and labor and delivery nurses going for decades, even at 3 in the morning, 5 in the morning, weekends and holidays. But as much as there are great joys in what I do professionally, we are not immune to some of the sorrows and despair as well, as we also help patients get through miscarriages, and we also help families struggle through stillbirth. But over the last 5 years, there is something greater that's been afflicting the labor and delivery units across this state, and that's the scourge of infants that are born to mothers addicted to various substances. At the forefront of those substances is clearly opiates. It's an epidemic that was here before COVID and will be here after COVID as well. But many of those women who are using opiates also are using methamphetamines and marijuana. Senators, our communities are truly hurting. Cannabis use in pregnancy is increasing, largely because of the perceived lack of risk. In the last 10 years, the percentage of women who perceived no risk of cannabis use during pregnancy increased from 5% to 20%, largely because of legalization across the country and changing social attitudes. We've seen more than double the use of marijuana use in the last decade. 50% of women who use cannabis will continue to use during pregnancy. And we now know in the last number of years the increasing potency of THC. Well, what are those effects of marijuana in pregnancy? The American College of OBGYN, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine all suggest and avoid cannabis in pregnancy and lactation. We know that cannabis products do cross the placenta and get into the breast milk, that there's an increased risk of preterm birth associated with marijuana use, as well as low birth weight. And what does that mean? That means that those children of low birth weight are not achieving their full growth potential even before they're born and take their first breath. There's also significant concern for the neurodevelopmental impact of marijuana use during pregnancy. We all know the effect that marijuana has on someone who's currently high. You can imagine how the developing brain in the first 9 months is developing with that same THC exposure. We also appreciate a 50% increase in the autism spectrum disorder associated with perinatal cannabis use. And we know when our teenagers experiment with marijuana use, it increases the chance of schizophrenia. I realize that this bill does not promote cannabis use in pregnancy, but House Bill 1598 does contribute to a perceived lack of risk. And why would our state approve something that was detrimental to our health? And we will certainly see a further increase in pregnancy. We will also see an increase in exposure to our youth and to our children, no matter how we try to mandate the packaging, the advertising, and the access. It will increase in overdose in the emergency room, youth use, and long-term life of addiction. No one ever starts marijuana with the end game being heroin addiction. But as we talk to our community members, as we talk to our patients who suffer with addiction, many started with smoking marijuana. I hope this body and the greater Senate will consider partnering with our communities to help address our society's collective hurting in healthy ways that will support individuals, families, and children, and not further complicate that pain through introducing another harmful product into our communities. May God have mercy on our collective social soul for even considering legalized harm to our children, families, and communities. I'd also like to briefly add a statement here by an emergency room physician. As the director of an emergency department and a practicing emergency physician, I am concerned about the legalization and operation of recreational marijuana through the state liquor commission or stores. What has become increasingly evident is that our society is in the midst of a pandemic of emotional breakdowns, a mental health crisis, so to speak. Emergency departments are seeing innumerable patients, many of which are adolescents, for a variety of mental health and substance-related concerns. When humans experience negative emotional states, such as sadness, fear, or anger, they often find comfort in behaviors that make them feel better. The act of taking a substance to feel better is where many of the problems arise. Individuals that suffer from profound emotional breakdowns are far more likely to wind up misusing substances. By increasing the ease of access to substances such as marijuana, we are inadvertently providing less opportunity for individuals to get emotionally healthy. And lastly, I'd like to read a statement from...
Could you state the name of that?
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. That was from Dr. Andrew Seefeld, and he lives in New Hampton.
And he's
an emergency room physician in Plymouth.
Thank you.
And this last testimony is also from an emergency room physician in Plymouth. His name is Dr. Jonathan Beach, and he resides in Plymouth. Good morning, honorable ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Jonathan Beach, and I would like to begin by apologizing for being unable to attend this important gathering in person. However, I thank you for the opportunity to communicate with the following statement. I work as an emergency department physician at Spear Memorial Hospital in Plymouth, and I am sending this statement regarding the legalization of marijuana for your review. I should point out that I am absent today due to my responsibilities at my addictions clinic. I feel this experience, my time in the ED, and multiple years working with special operations police forces places me in a unique position to comment on legalizing marijuana. My patients in the addiction center range from 22 to 67 years old. Many have been very successful with various life improvements, and some are making slower progress. Regardless, all have one thing in common: marijuana. I would hazard an educated guess that every one of these patients has tried marijuana in one form or another as they spiraled down the disastrous road of drug abuse. Marijuana has long been known as a gateway drug, and my experience confirms this concept. One interesting fact is that my patients toward the older end of the spectrum have no interest in marijuana, recognize it as a potential problem, and work to avoid it. The younger patients consider it common and expected. A drug screen positive for marijuana is normal for them and nothing to worry about. Despite this normalcy, any other drug relapse is always associated with marijuana. I was at a party and we smoked some dope. Then the cocaine came out and I couldn't resist. I have listened to numerous stories highlighting the relaxing impact of marijuana and the disappearance of inhibitive tendencies that normally would help prevent relapse. It is for this, as well as numerous medical reasons, that I am absolutely against the legalization of marijuana in New Hampshire. State endorsement of this drug will have an incredibly negative impact on the health and safety of our citizens. Historically, cigarette companies have had to make numerous changes.
Doctor?
Yes.
We need to expedite.
Absolutely. As an ED doctor, I have sat at the bedside of a 2-year-old who got into a patient's marijuana brownies, vital signs unstable, and parents paralyzed with fear. I have placed a breathing tube in a 24-year-old that has overdosed the 4th time in 6 months, rushing to get on the phone to a helicopter to bring her to a larger hospital. I've had discussions with a 36-year-old who feels she doesn't need her medication, just wants her heroin. By the way, her husband came. They shot up together. She's now facing a lifelong condition, needing a heart transplant now. On behalf of my family, my colleagues, and my patients, please do not make these paths any easier. Do not endorse or legalize marijuana, and continue to work to protect this wonderful state. Signed, Jonathan Beach, DO.
Any questions from members of the committee? I have several. Doctor, you stated in your testimony that 10 years ago, 5% of pregnancies had cannabis influence. And in the last 10 years, it's now up to 20% of pregnant women have some.
Not quite. I said that 10 years ago, only 5% of pregnant women felt that marijuana posed a risk during pregnancy.
Okay.
And that increased over that 10-year span to more than 20% now who feel it doesn't pose a risk.
So that's a good thing.
Does not pose a risk. No, they feel that the risk is decreased. More and more women feel that it's safe to use in pregnancy.
And your medical opinion is probably to the contrary, that it is not safe.
That is correct.
All right. And did I hear you say that there's a 50% increase in autism experienced with prenatal use of marijuana?
In the perinatal use, whether it was before or after use, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Hearing none. Thanks, Doctor.
Sure.
Margaret Burns, New Hampshire Municipal Association, is opposed but not speaking. Okay. Jake Berry? Jake Berry here? Speaking and opposed, and I'd ask you to go to 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. My name is Jake Berry. I'm the Vice President of Policy. Vice President of Policy at New Futures. As many of you know, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit health policy and advocacy organization. We've been working for nearly 25 years to address substance use and addiction issues in our state. We spent much of the last year developing principles for what we consider to be responsible marijuana commercialization policy in our state. These principles are based on a comprehensive review of best practices and policies from other states that have commercialized. They cover a variety of areas, including protecting children and youth, promoting social justice and equity, protecting public places and population health, and ensuring funding from revenue to support harm reduction efforts. As you can see from the chart that we just distributed, HB 1598 fails to meet each of these principles. It does not include any potency limits to protect from dependency or psychosis. It does not expunge past criminal records to address past criminal justice wrongs. It does not limit the voice or presence of industry on regulatory bodies. And most applicable to this committee, it does not ensure funding to support harm reduction efforts across the state. With its heavy focus on tax relief, this bill does not, leaves next to no funding to support substance use prevention, treatment, or recovery programs. As you all know, more than 20 years after the alcohol fund was created, we're still not properly allocating funds outlined in statute. That is continuing to have a devastating impact on, again, our ability to provide access to the treatment that people need. As we contemplate commercializing another substance, it's absolutely critical that we do not make the same mistake and that we direct a substantial portion of revenue generated to address the addiction issues that continue to ravage New Hampshire. With that, we ask you to vote this bill ITL, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you for your brevity.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Erica Lyon from Derry, speaking in favor. 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I come here today representing Derry. On our town election, we had a non-binding question on the ballot. It said, are you in favor of legalizing recreational cannabis, marijuana, in New Hampshire? It didn't meet 2/3. We had 1,528 people voting in favor, 815 against. That was 65.2% of our voters want to have legalized cannabis. We talk about the availability. Today, cannabis is available. If you don't care about the law, you can find somebody and you can get some, and you can cross the border to our adjoining states to get it. The only people today who aren't using it that want to are those people who respect the law so much that despite its availability, they won't do it because it's illegal. I think that's one of the areas where some of the opposition misses the mark because it is available, and it's only those really conscientious people who are abstaining now simply because of the status in New Hampshire law. The people of New Hampshire are asking for this. I do know that in Derry, the chairman of the town council and the town council all have spoken in support of having one of these facilities in Derry. They would like to have one. They have not put that specifically to the voters, but that question was one that supported that move and that request to try and get one in, especially as we develop Exit 4A. From my constituents, I ask you to legalize recreational cannabis in New Hampshire, whether it's through this or whether it's through an expansion with 629. They're asking for it, and I hope we can deliver that for them. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Do you suppose the result of your survey might have been different if you asked the question, are you in favor of legalizing cannabis knowing that you could be charged with a federal felony?
Thank you for the question. That is one that it may have changed it, but I think most people are aware that federally it hasn't been enforced for 3 administrations, and federally it's moving towards legalization. I think that that's one of the areas some opposition don't want to create this whole framework, because once the federal government gets out of the marijuana regulation, marijuana game, that having a rigid framework in New Hampshire might be more of a concern. But I do think that most people are aware that federally it remains an unenforced but illegal substance.
Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Note that Jacob Santiago is a citizen not speaking but opposed. Representative Andrew Prout not speaking but in support. Janet Hunt from New Futures not speaking but opposed. Kimberly Wade, a Guilford resident, not speaking but opposed. And Heather Brown, speaking on behalf of herself and TCMOB.
Yes, that would be the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board.
Okay,
And actually, I didn't have a chance to write it down. I was in such a quick hurry, but I have also been asked to hand in Representative Jerry Knerk's testimony as well.
all right, so if you wouldn't mind, state your name and your position and 2 minutes.
My name is Heather Marie Brown. I am the co-chair of the Therapeutic Cannabis Medical Oversight Board for the state of New Hampshire, and I am the patient representative. I will be handing in the TCMOB position and also the position of Representative Jerry Knerk. I will quickly just tell you that our position, basically, our statement stands, any bill legalizing cannabis for adult use in New Hampshire should be evaluated to determine its impacts on the therapeutic cannabis program. The therapeutic cannabis program is vulnerable and must be preserved if adult use legalization passes. 1598 does not do that. Now, myself, as a citizen and a therapeutic cannabis patient, I am going to tell you my opinion. I will honestly tell you that there's probably no one who wants to see cannabis legalization happen more than myself. But 1598 is not the way to do it. My thoughts and opinions are, in the past, the study commission was brought together to come up with a plan in regards to legalization. 1598 is the exact opposite of what was recommended. There could be a negative impact on the therapeutic cannabis program if the price of recreational cannabis is lower for potentially the same products available at our medicinal dispensaries. This could possibly cause people to leave the TC program and therefore lose the absolutely necessary guidance and counseling regarding the appropriate product to use and suggestions or recommendations on how to titrate their doses. This bill would also cause a loss in product availability or accessibility, such as concentrates and edibles, that many patients may not realize till it's too late due to their excitement over cheaper products. Nor do I believe as a patient I could treat myself adequately due to THC amount, possible restrictions, or limited possession amounts. This bill ultimately will promote unintentional growth within the illegal market. Because of the large amount of non-clarification of specific items throughout the entire bill, it will unintentionally cause people to break the law due to confusion and lack of understanding of the intended law. 1598 does not require cannabis to fall under any of the same regulations or guidelines that therapeutic cannabis has to. 1598 also does require edibles which would only be sold to patients to go through the same quality control. So it does not require it to go through the same quality control as what therapeutic cannabis edibles are required to go through. Rules or restrictions. Not to mention that the therapeutic cannabis and its related products are overseen by DHHS, but yet they would not be under 1598. If this bill passes and goes into law, that I also believe that if this goes into law due to federal illegalities, I believe the state of New Hampshire would never actually be able to open any stores, transport stock, manufacture or produce products, or actually sell cannabis safely without facing federal repercussions, either legally or financially. All state employees would be at risk of federal prosecution, and the state cannot legally put them in that position if the state were to create and control a cannabis monopoly. 1598 also would not allow or create economic growth and development for New Hampshire citizens.
30 seconds.
Such as small business and agriculture. Public health and safety is an afterthought for 1598. This bill does nothing to correct the damage caused by prohibition, nor does it do anything to support equality. Basically, in closing, this bill is inappropriate and should be killed immediately and not allowed to move forward.
Thank you for your testimony. I do apologize for rushing you, but we've got a number of 3 pages worth of testimony.
No, I completely understand. I completely
Are there any
understand.
questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Representative Timothy Egan, in favor, not testifying. Is Cora Long here? Testifying in opposition. Welcome, Ms. Long.
Hi, good morning. Oh, sorry. I'm Cora Long.
2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Cora Long. I'm a resident of Rochester, New Hampshire, and I'm here today representing somebody with lived experience with serious mental illness and substance use disorder in my youth. What I want to say is that in my youth, I had several attempts of suicide and that landed me in psychiatric inpatient care. One of the things that really perpetuated my suicidal ideation and suicide attempts was my use of marijuana in my youth. And the way I was feeling at the time of using it, my serious mental illness, part of that was anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and paranoia. And when you mix marijuana with that, depending on my mood, it either triggered me and sent me into a spiral, or it was fun. But the risk was always there for me, and sometimes that risk was very, very grave. Another thing I'd like to add is I actually live in East Rochester on the border of Lebanon, Maine, and in 3 miles, there are 5 dispensaries. You can't drive a single minute without passing one, and I drive that road regularly with my child to the diner that we go every Sunday, and she's always like, wow, there's a lot of marijuana shops here. And, you know, I worry about our youth these days, especially the ones with serious mental illness. And, you know, given the state of New Hampshire's mental health crisis with youth and adults and our capacity to provide appropriate care to them, I worry how marijuana will impact that, especially for youth such as me in the past. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I commend you on the courage that you bring to this hearing today as someone that has been in the inferno, so to speak.
Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Are there any questions from members of the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, from Prime ATC, Keenan Blum. I would ask you to expedite if.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. I will be concise with my testimony.
Thank you very much.
So, for the record, my name is Keenan Blum, and I serve as President and CEO of Prime Alternative Treatment Centers of New Hampshire. Established in 2016, Prime is one of the not-for-profit ATCs that's licensed to provide therapeutic cannabis under RSA 126X. We have approximately 55 staff members, and we operate a production facility in...
Speaking in opposition.
Yes, we are speaking in opposition. So our ATC has had only one focus up to this point, and that's serving the therapeutic cannabis patients of New Hampshire. Generally, we support legalizing cannabis for adults 21 and over, and we support another legalization bill that is being considered in the Senate. Unfortunately, we cannot support HB 1598 in its current form. I will share 3 reasons with you today. First, responsible cannabis legalization should be based on lessons learned from other states. New Hampshire had a bipartisan study commission on this issue, and it spoke with regulators and policy experts in 8 states. The commission recommended against a state monopoly retail model. No state has tried a state monopoly model, and it seems like a very risky path forward for New Hampshire cannabis. Second, HB 1598 may produce revenue, but at what cost to patients and the therapeutic cannabis program? If cannabis becomes available in state-run stores at the lowest prices in New England, this would disincentivize patients from registering for the therapeutic cannabis program. It's possible that patients would benefit from low prices at state-run stores, but would they receive the same educational and support services that ATCs provide? This seems unlikely to me. At Prime, we are committed to educating patients and helping them have the best possible experience with therapeutic cannabis. These educational services may not produce revenue for the state, but we believe they are of substantial value to patients, and we believe they would be of value to adult consumers as New Hampshire seeks to transition from a culture of prohibition to a culture of responsible use. Additionally, not-for-profit ATCs would face a tremendous disadvantage if we are forced to compete against state-run stores supplied by for-profit businesses. This is especially true if state stores are approved to sell edible products specifically to therapeutic cannabis patients. This would be unfair. Third, HB 1598 does not provide a clear path forward for ATCs or any other prospective cannabis businesses. We are not seeking special treatment. We are only looking for a clear and reasonable path forward that allows us and other businesses to compete and potentially flourish. This bill does not provide a clear path to the ATCs or to any other prospective businesses. Instead, it gives the Liquor Commission broad authority to write rules and regulations with little guidance from the legislature. We have no way of knowing in advance what these regulations might look like.
30 seconds.
Yes, sir. But we do know this. Under HB 1598, the Liquor Commission would be the only legal purchaser of cannabis produced by New Hampshire businesses, and it would also be the sole regulator. This does not seem appealing from a business perspective, and it's unlikely that the market created by 1598 will be more successful than other states. Finally, although we have no choice but to oppose this bill as currently written, we would be more than happy to review any proposed amendments and reconsider our position accordingly. On behalf of our staff, managers, and directors at Prime ATC, I thank you very much for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for being brief and with a little help. Any questions from members of the committee? So I have one. I sense from your remarks that you're concerned about competition from the state-run agency, such as if it was established. Why?
Well, many of the products they would be selling, other than edibles under this bill, would be the exact same products that we sell. Currently, a patient has to visit their doctor, receive a card from the state, and go through essentially jump through a number of hoops to become part of the program. If you can go buy the same thing at a similar cost, why would you go through those extra steps and register with the program? That also potentially affects your Second Amendment rights. So in that case, I would see a potential decrease in revenue for the ATCs, which would potentially put us out of business and not allow us to provide the guidance and educational support that gets our current therapeutic patients the results they achieve.
Thank you for that answer. Any further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Opposed and not speaking, Candace Tucker. Okay, opposed and speaking is Leo Edner and Mason Glue from the Youth Advisory, or Advocacy Advisory Council. Gentlemen, welcome. I am envious of your youth and request brevity.
Good morning.
And remember, we're trying to keep it to 2 minutes, okay, guys? Yeah.
Good morning. We are two members representing the Youth Advocacy and Advisory Council, also known as YAC, of communities.
All right, so just state your names.
My name is Leo Ebner, and I'm a sophomore at Plymouth Regional High School.
And my name is Mason Glue. I'm a freshman at Plymouth Regional High School.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We are the Youth Advocacy and Advisory Council, and we are a part of Communities for Alcohol and Drug for Youth, or CADY, located in Plymouth, New Hampshire. The YAC program encourages youth to educate communities on problems and solutions related to substance misuse, and we are honored to represent the voice of Central New Hampshire youth today. We would like to thank you for your service to the state of New Hampshire and hope you will help us continue our work in youth alcohol and drug prevention. As youth advocates, we ask you to vote no on House Bill 1598. As young leaders, we'd like to talk about our perspectives and what we are seeing in our school and with our peers. We live in a college town where there's a lot of access to alcohol and drugs, and more marijuana and vaping than ever before. In 2019, 32.9% of area youth reported that they were using marijuana during the past 30 days. According to the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, or the YRBS. This number is very concerning because it represents a 77.8% increase of youth use since the 2017 YRBS. Plymouth also has an ATC, a medical marijuana dispensary. There are many factors influencing increased youth use. However, too many kids are getting the message that marijuana is not harmful and that it's even good for them.
The 2019 YRBS data indicates that 1/3 of PRH's students reported that they were using marijuana, and this is pre-COVID information. We don't need a survey to tell us that marijuana use rates among our peers is increasing. We know our peers are using marijuana and THC products like edibles and vaping THC oils and concentrates. Even if legalized for adult use, it's clear that there is already a big youth marijuana problem. We are concerned to see the results of the 2021 YRBS. We predict the Central Region data will see an even bigger rise in youth marijuana use. Commercializing recreational marijuana would send the message that this addictive drug is harmless when research and data support that it is just the opposite. New Hampshire kids and teens are seeing a lot of misinformation on marijuana over social media and seeing it as a cool drug to use for fun or even to self-medicate for anxiety and other mental health problems. New Hampshire is currently in the top 10 states for marijuana use among 12 to 17-year-olds. With New Hampshire use already being one of the highest in the country, legalizing recreational marijuana will only increase the use among youth and add to addiction problems. Adolescent substance abuse is America's #1 public health problem. The most recent CDC SAMHSA National Youth Risk Behavior Survey revealed that 26% of high school students have used marijuana in the past 30 days. The 2019 Modern Future Survey reported 70% of high school seniors did not view regular cannabis smoking and THC as being harmful.
When more teens perceive cannabis or THC
All right,
products...
Dan, how much longer do you have?
Probably 1 more minute.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
When more teens perceive cannabis or THC products not to be harmful and access increases, as seen in states that have legalized, cannabis use increases. One example of the impact of the power of influencing and advertising on youth is that students in 6th through 8th grades who saw ads for medical marijuana were twice as likely as others to have used marijuana or to say that they intend to use in the future. Marijuana use continues to increase and social norms are changing. We know marijuana is a drug that has very high abuse rate. House Bill 1598 puts no limits on THC. This is extremely dangerous and shows no consideration to the health of New Hampshire and New Hampshire's kids. THC harms developing brains, but due to misinformation and confusion, perception of risk continues to decline. We believe this is because of the debate of legalization and the state and national levels, influencers on social media, as well as the increased access and the normalization that it is green and it is good for you. Some parents believe that they'd rather have their kid use marijuana. At least it's not heroin, right? Some parents don't realize the risks of THC and are very accepting of their kids using marijuana. Some parents are actually giving their kids pot. That's the problem. Some parents are irresponsible in their own marijuana use, putting their children and their children's friends at increased risk. When perception of risk decreases, use increases. In our opinion, legalizing marijuana is not worth the risk to our futures.
Our generation's potential is limitless. We need sound policy and practice, not more addiction. Our peers are confused and continue to experiment with marijuana because they believe that it is harmless. Legalizing recreational marijuana won't make the drug less harmful, but it will increase access. And this means more kids using it at younger ages during vulnerable physical and mental development stages. We know representing our state is a serious responsibility, and we want to thank you again for your service. When you make decisions on legalizing recreational marijuana, please think about the future of New Hampshire residents with special consideration given to the impact on children and youth. Thank you for listening, and please vote no on HB 1598.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thanks very much for coming. Appreciate it. What's the availability of grass in your environment?
It's very available. I at least know if I were to want to get it, I know exactly where to go. And a lot of kids can get it from the college as well. So it's very available.
Further question?
Please.
So both of you are from Plymouth?
Yes.
College town?
Yeah, but we go to the high school.
Yes, I understand. What is your perception of the availability of the pot for the college kids?
I'm not sure, but I think a lot of it probably comes from the college, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you for speaking up. When I was your age, I was certainly not testifying in front of a Senate committee. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay. Opposed but not speaking, Maureen Ebner, Kyla Manning from Katy, Denise Coolidge from Katy, Debbie Baird for Making It Happen. There's Brian Rod here. Speaking in opposition. Welcome. 2 minutes, please.
Yes. I'd just like to say thank you guys for taking the time to hear my testimony today. This is the first time I've testified.
State your name.
Yes, sorry, Brian Rudd.
Thank you. And from
Concord. Yeah, representing myself. This is the first time I've testified before a Senate committee in New Hampshire. I've sat in on these meetings previously, both remote and in person. I'd like to say that personally, I'm in favor of cannabis legalization. I believe it is relatively a safe recreational substance compared to Schedule I substances and alcohol, right, which is already legal. I believe it's an effective medicine, and I also believe that the legalization of cannabis is inevitable. I do believe there is a right way and a wrong way to do this, and I'm here today to speak in opposition of House Bill 1598 because I believe it is the wrong way to legalize cannabis. I would try to be brief here, but in 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified by 46 out of 48 states, effectively prohibiting alcohol consumption, manufacture, and sale in the United States. It was repealed in 1933, the 21st Amendment. That same year, the New Hampshire State Liquor Commission was established, and that is 89 years ago this year. So essentially, that is 4 generations of citizens in New Hampshire that can't legally compete in that market. And after reading the report for 2021 of their revenue, their reported revenue was $801 million, and that's net sales. Within those net sales, $182.5 million of profit to the general fund. Essentially $182.5 million that wasn't going to private businesses run by citizens in New Hampshire. I'm not saying it's something I believe we should change. I don't think that's what we're talking about here today. But I also don't believe it's something that we would be able to change if we wanted to. $182.5 million is a substantial revenue stream. And I think that is a faucet that would be hard to turn off. I have worked in the cannabis industry for the better part of a decade. And I would like the opportunity someday to potentially compete in a retail cannabis market, potentially with my own business or something to that effect. And I see this bill as a potential existential threat to that dream. I also believe this bill has the potential to prevent countless other state citizens from competing within this legal free market of the adult use market that I believe is inevitable. Free market industry has many benefits. Competition between private businesses leads to higher quality products at a lower cost to consumers. More effective allocation of resources, which leads to innovation and economic growth for these businesses. The governor has signaled soft support for this bill, something to the effect of, if we're going to do it, this is the way we should do it. I disagree with that statement. I think his previous take on legalization was a better way to go. Essentially, look at the laboratory of states and see what works and what doesn't work and implement the best way forward for New Hampshire.
30 seconds.
Huh?
30 seconds.
Yeah. I think legalizing cannabis in this way is uncharted waters. I think there are federal barriers that we have yet to see. I think there are economic barriers we have yet to see. Canada has attempted this model, and due to product shortages and negative earnings, as you guys have heard today, most of those provinces have expanded private retail licenses for these businesses and scaled back provincial licenses. I believe this bill has the potential to set up a generational state monopoly on the sale of cannabis.
I'm gonna have to make you suspend because we understand the tenor of your remarks, but we've got 2 more pages of people to testify, and you've given me more than 2
All right, well, I'll
minutes.
close up by saying I'd like you guys to please vote against House Bill 1598, and thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony.
Thank you, and thanks for your indulgence. Okay, here we go. Elizabeth Brochu from Central Region.
Substance Misuse Prevention Coordinator.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Brochu, and I am the Youth Services Director for Communities for Alcohol and Drug for Youth, also known as Katie.
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I thought I spoke louder, but I'll speak louder.
I'm 70, my hearing ain't what it used to be.
And Katie is a Central New Hampshire nonprofit organization. I am also a New Hampshire certified prevention specialist and the substance misuse prevention coordinator for Central New Hampshire. I appreciate the opportunity to share my concerns regarding the important and concerning issues of House Bill 1598. I thank each committee member for your service to New Hampshire. If passed into law, House Bill 1598 will legalize and commercialize impairment. We have overwhelming quantitative and qualitative data from other states that legalizing cannabis causes direct harm to the most vulnerable populations, increases accessibility to youth. Cannabis is a Schedule I drug, as you have heard, and it is a Schedule I drug because the sole intent of using THC products in any form is to become impaired. THC, the key ingredient in cannabis, alters the function of the hippocampus and the frontal cortex in the brain. These are the areas that enable a person to form new memories and shift his or her attention to focus. As a result, using cannabis and THC causes impaired thinking and interferes with a person's ability to learn and perform complicated tasks. Impairment is guaranteed when someone uses THC products, especially with the high potency THC now and extracted products ranging from waxes, oils, dabs, and other plant-based forms. If someone using cannabis does not get the desired effects, the next step is to use more. The legal drugs currently sold for profit in New Hampshire, alcohol and nicotine products, can be misused and have addictive tendencies. However, these legal drugs can be used and consumed without impairment effects. Alcohol is a beverage, and someone can consume an alcoholic beverage without becoming impaired. In fact, science confirms that an adult of legal drinking age can consume 1 to 2 standard drinks daily, and a standard drink is 0.6% of pure alcohol per beverage. And they do not have to become impaired or addicted. Nicotine products include many harmful chemicals and, yes, are highly addictive. However, when someone is using a nicotine product, they can perform tasks, operate machinery, drive a vehicle, and are not under the influence of experiencing impairment. Cannabis and THC guarantee impairment. On the prevention messaging side of the media component of this bill, all media and commercial messaging are effective if consistently repeated in a sound and comprehensive approach. Most successful campaigns must run messages at least 3 times to take effect. Unfortunately, the $150,000 allocated in House Bill 1598 is a drop in the bucket and will not support a comprehensive ongoing prevention media campaign. This allocation will only support a few months of educational messaging for TV, radio, print, etc.
30 seconds.
Thank you. As an example, Comparison Colorado ran a comprehensive statewide and ongoing media campaign for $2 million. The bill sponsors of House Bill 1598 have completely missed the mark of this safeguard. It is very disappointing. At the minimum, it should be $500,000 should be dedicated for an effective ongoing statewide media campaign each year. I personally believe that that should be happening now because, as you clearly state or heard, a lot of New Hampshire residents are not aware of the dangers of marijuana and cannabis.
All right, wrap it up.
Yes. By legalizing and commercializing cannabis, New Hampshire policymakers will be responsible for making impairment a priority over the health and safety and well-being of its citizens and children. House Bill 1598 is legalizing and commercializing impairment, and it won't take long before buyer's remorse sets in. Please consider these serious consequences and vote House Bill 1598 ITL. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for tolerating my encouragement. There are numbers of people from the same organization signed up to speak. So amongst yourselves, I'd like you to designate who you want to speak, and if we have time, we'll get to the others. We have about 3 bills to exec here before 12 o'clock, so we're going to try to get through this and give everyone that's represented a chance to speak. Katie, you have Emily Shanahan, Deb Narrow, and Ann Stark. Ann Stark is signed up in opposition, not speaking. So who's going to go first? All right, thank you and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in opposition of HB 1598. My name is Emily Shanahan. I'm a New Hampshire Certified Prevention Specialist. I'm also the Outreach and Communications Director at Communities for Alcohol and Drug-Free Youth, and also the coordinator of the New Hampshire chapter of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, a coalition of individuals who believe that the health, safety, and economic harms of recreational cannabis legalization far outweigh the perceived social benefits. In New Hampshire, adolescent and young adult cannabis use is a significant concern, and it has been for many years now. With recreational cannabis legalization, New Hampshire will see high-potency THC products, an increase of access, and an increase in youth use as other legalized states have already experienced. We will also see an increase of not only young adult use, but also in adult cannabis use. This will affect work efficiency, the capacity of New Hampshire's workforce, and increase safety risks on our roadways due to impaired driving. Our state will feel these ramifications, and it will hurt our youth, our families, and our communities. We are in the middle of a mental health and addiction crisis. We should be helping youth and families, not hurting them. The U.S. Surgeon General issued an advisory on youth mental health, stating mental health challenges in children, adolescents, and young adults are real and they are widespread. By legalizing and commercializing cannabis, we are contributing to that problem. Cannabis, especially high-potency products, have been linked to depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, suicide attempts, suicide, and addiction. If we are to effectively address the drug crisis, we must work to increase proper prevention messaging and prevent addiction for profit, not encourage it. Science tells us that the developing brain is especially vulnerable to addiction. That's why addiction is often referred to as the disease of adolescence. Included with my testimony, you'll see an insert titled, "Why Prevention? The Escalation of Drug Use During the Teen Years." You will see a surge of drug use during adolescence between the ages of 12 and 20, and then use tapers off during the rest of the lifespan. Addiction is this country's largest preventable health problem. Although focus in the past years have been on the rising rates of addiction and death due to the opioid epidemic, we cannot afford to gloss over the reality that another drug with addictive potential is becoming increasingly available.
30 seconds.
Decades of research demonstrate unequivocally that cannabis is not a harmless drug, especially to youth. 90% of those struggling with addiction began using drugs before the age of 18. You have the power to stop addiction before it starts. I ask you, please protect New Hampshire's children by voting HB 1598 inexpedient to legislate. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for tolerating my encouragement. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Deb Narrow.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this opportunity. And
2 minutes.
Yes, as a former state representative, I understand the responsibility before you, and I appreciate your deliberations. As you know, too many New Hampshire children are struggling with mental health emergencies, and passage of HB 1598 will only exacerbate that problem. I've actually culled down and summarized my testimony that I've passed out. The U.S. Surgeon General has an advisory warning against youth substance misuse and its harmful effects. No amount of legislative safeguards can protect the most vulnerable among us. As promises made and promises unkept on alcohol, tobacco, and therapeutic cannabis can attest. Let's consider drug-endangered children. In 2021, New Hampshire Poison Control received calls involving 22 children under the age of 5 who were exposed to marijuana. 4 of those calls involved toddlers from my region who were admitted to our local hospital in THC-induced comas. They had ingested high-potency THC gummies. If we cannot keep the diversion of THC out of the hands of toddlers, how are we ever going to protect our youth? With cannabis legalization and commercialization, more cannabis will be on the ground, resulting in even more emergencies. Presently, the mental health and substance use disorder treatment for children and youth is woefully scarce. It waits months long at community mental health centers. My organization has a juvenile restorative justice program, and we cannot find treatment for youth substance use disorders. Children with mental health crises are boarded in hospital rooms across the state waiting for inpatient beds at Hampstead Hospital. There's only 40 beds. Too many of our children are struggling, and it should be our priority to meet their critical needs, not to spend millions to support addiction for profit ventures. Marijuana potency has tripled in the past 20 years and sends more youth to treatment than any other drug. During an ongoing overdose epidemic and a worsening mental health crisis, HB 1589 aims to settle an addictive, high-concentrate substance that's only going to multiply our problems. Wouldn't our children in our state and families be better served by focusing on prevention? Let's stop the problem before it begins. I also want to, this is
30 seconds, Dan.
I'm speaking about child endangerment, and that's what we have in front of us here, and we have to put a stop to it. I just want to say one more thing. Representative Abbas had mentioned that the horses were out of the barn. Clearly they are. If we legalize, we will have a stampede, trampling our children. Is that what we want? Is New Hampshire ready really ready for this? My answer is no. And so all you have to do is look at California, the reform bill. They have buyer's remorse, and the pro-marijuana governor and Speaker of the House have put through legislative reforms that really speak to the fact of endangerment of their children and their state. So let's look towards that. There's information in my testimony. I know you're going to be execing very soon, but I do heartily recommend that you listen to the testimony of the experts that have come before you today that have deep concerns, and I hope that you will vote ITL. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none.
Okay, thank you.
Say hi to Tim. Michelle Rico Jonas. From NPC.
Yes.
Testifying in opposition.
Good morning.
2 minutes, Michelle.
Yes. My name is Michelle Rico Jonas. I am a resident of Hudson, New Hampshire, and I'm the newly appointed director of the National Prevention Coalition. I'm not going to reiterate what many of my partners have said, but I do want to stress a few things, and that is that there are several studies which have shown significant consequences on the legalization that include increased illegal use by minors, increased traffic accidents, increased emergency room visits related to overdoses, again, the THC levels, and how is that even being considered, increased hospitalizations, and increased risk of addiction and use of other illegal drugs. So I am opposed to this bill. A couple of questions I guess I will leave with you is that even if there were regulation, how are we going to say is too much when someone's getting behind a vehicle or taking care of somebody and exposing them to, as we just heard, young people finding those edibles. Medicinal marijuana does not get scrutinized like other controlled drugs, so there's no clear science even around the high levels when legalized. So I will also leave with one suggestion for the legislature to consider, and that is where we do have therapeutic cannabis in the state of New Hampshire, many states have put that into their prescription drug monitoring programs so that they're able to review and see, any of the difficulties or processes with marijuana being prescribed. It also allows our prescribers to see which of their patients are using medicinal marijuana, but then coming in and asking for opioids and or vice versa. So I would leave that suggestion to you as well.
Excellent suggestion. Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none. Oh, sorry, Senator Daniels.
Do you know how long marijuana stays in your blood system?
I think it varies, and I don't have it. We can certainly look that up and get that for you. I know that, there's testing that, they use the hair, the blood, and that kind of thing. Certainly many of the folks that work in New Hampshire
So,
and are...
in a word, no, you don't know.
Yeah,
Thank
I don't
you.
know. We can find out, though.
Right. I can tell you from the drug testing done in the airlines, 30 days. It will stay, traces will be testable within 30 days because they have very rigorous, anti-drug abuse for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Cocaine, on the other hand, 24 hours and it's out. So, all right. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you for your time.
And I will carry that to the PDMP.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Not speaking but in opposition, Celeste Clark. Let's see, RCFY. Anyone, is there a Kaylee McGlynn or Marissa McGlynn or Alicia McCall or Ava Lind? One of you, for starters. Good morning.
Morning.
And welcome.
I just want to thank everyone for
Sorry,
serving.
just for the record, we need to have your name.
Yeah, it's Kaylee McGlynn.
Okay.
I'm a sophomore at Raymond High School, and I just want to thank all for serving on the New Hampshire Senate. I really appreciate it. I will now share my perspective as a student attending a local high school in New Hampshire. When marijuana vacates the brain of a teenager, we poison the future. Because I am the youth, I see the youth, and I speak on behalf of the youth who does not want my high school walls filled with more hallucinogens than it already is. It is quite rare that I go throughout a school day without being asked if I have what people now call dab pens, a form to inhale the chemicals of marijuana in a much more discreet and unrecognizable way, to which I responded no and was looked at as prude and repulsive. So why is this the new normal? Why do I have a prepared answer for being asked for drugs in school? I have close friends whose parents openly buy and give their child marijuana to use. With the irresponsibility levels and the distrust of parents in New Hampshire that live and dispense with, it is not safe for HB 1598FN to pass with confidence that our youth will not be affected negatively. I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. It takes a good deal of courage. Thank you for your brevity. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Kaylee. Not speaking but opposed from SPHN. I'm not sure what that is. Someone wanted to say, Yoshida Thangjai, I think it is. Also opposed, not speaking, Samantha Arison. Is there Michael McLaughlin from Sanctuary ATC? I know you know the drill. 2 minutes.
Starting when?
Now.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Michael McLaughlin. I'm a lawyer and lobbyist in Concord, New Hampshire. I represent Sanctuary ATC. We are opposed to the bill for very many reasons. The first reason is Sanctuary ATC has the opportunity to serve people up north. If we add through HB 1598 a well-funded competitor who will take away 30-40% of our business, we'll be out of business. The offer in 1598 to allow ATCs to form a for-profit to produce a product for the state is worthless. Anybody who's associated with a business can start a production business and apply through the Liquor Commission to produce. There's no incentive in the bill to ask us to jump in and help. So in that regard, it's nothing. So the creation of 1598 is a direct competition, well-funded with state money, paying no interest back. But there's been some discussion about there's banking opportunities for therapeutic cannabis. We pay exorbitant interest rates. We can get money, but it's very expensive. As a lawyer, I'm going to circle back to what you said earlier in the day. The therapeutic cannabis business is put together by the state for a reason. The relief of suffering. The state has taken the position of benign neglect. They're looking the other way. What they did is set up a structure to produce product to protect the citizens. 1598 is a breach of the moral authority of the government. The Constitution of the state of New Hampshire is a subset of the United States Constitution. The New Hampshire Constitution says we'll obey the federal Constitution. We don't have the opportunity to write it in the federal system to suddenly say, this is a law we choose to ignore. So as a lawyer, I look at 1598 and say, I can't believe there's a government who openly wants to flout that. That nobody else has done it and we shouldn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming today. Perhaps you can answer my question. I know that that New Hampshire laws does allow for a nonprofit to operate a for-profit business, but I didn't know if there's any regulations on what the limits of that might be.
I do not, but I know if we started a for-profit, it would end up being a nonprofit. We wouldn't make any money.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. This hasn't come up in the hearing, but it has been brought up in written testimony we've received. We've heard that passing this bill would put state employees in jeopardy because they'd be involved with a business that's illegal under federal law. My question is, in any of the states that have legalized it, have any of their revenue department employees been placed in that same jeopardy for handling financial transactions from businesses that are legal under federal law?
Out of respect to Senator Guy, my answer is no. I don't know.
You don't know or no?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much. Okay. Not speaking in opposition, Ava Lynn from RCFY, Pamela Baker from RCFY, Someone tell me what RCFY stands for? Louder? Thank you. Yeah, we have, I want one of you to come forward. Yeah, for now, because we're running out of time.
Hi, my name is Alicia Call, and I am a freshman at Raymond High School.
Thank you.
So, in March of 2021, the town of Raymond voted that they did not want anything in our community promoting marijuana.
Wait, slow down. We're not hostile. We need to understand what you're saying. Pull the mic a little closer and relax. We want to hear what you say. Yeah.
Okay. So, in March of 2021, the town of Raymond voted that they did not want anything in our community promoting marijuana. This shows that not everyone in New Hampshire wants marijuana to be legalized. So, the legalization of marijuana would also allow easier access for the youth of New Hampshire to the substance. Marijuana has many risks that people don't understand, especially the youth, one of which being how it affects the brain. Studies have shown that marijuana will affect your IQ in a negative way. Marijuana also negatively affects your coordination and movement. In attempts to lower marijuana use in our town, we've noticed that if we increase awareness and decrease access, we will overall decrease the usage. By legalizing marijuana, it would increase the usage in not only our town, but New Hampshire as a whole.
Thank you. Any questions, members of the committee? Thanks for coming forward. All right. So is Susan McEwen here? Speaking in opposition, and I'm going to ask you to really be fast.
All right. Thank you, Senator Guyda and the committee. I am Susan McKeown. I'm from Manchester, and I am here for myself. I practice as a pediatric nurse practitioner for 41 years. I'm a certified prevention specialist. I'm also the parent of 4 children. Our older son, at 40, died 10 weeks ago of an overdose. And I'm not here for him today. I'm here for the other families of loved ones who are fighting for them. For the past 19 years, I have co-facilitated the Faster Family Support Group in Manchester every Tuesday evening. It's a peer support group for adults who have a loved one suffering with substance use disorder. For the hundreds of families that have come through our group, I do not know of one family whose loved one did not start with marijuana. One of the biggest challenges we have regarding substance use disorder is that we have not yet determined who is vulnerable. Research has shown that 1 out of 6 teens and 1 out of 11 adults are susceptible. For young people, it really is a crapshoot. The teen brain is highly susceptible to being affected. We need to acknowledge that although this legislation is aimed at those over 21, we know from our own experience with alcohol and those in Colorado and other states who have had a few years of experience that use by adolescents has markedly increased, and the reason for that is the perception of harm has markedly decreased. And can you blame an adolescent who says, if it's going to be okay for me in a couple of years, why, what's the big deal now that obviously they legislated it, so it must be okay? The distinction between medical and recreational use has been blurred by big business eager to pass this legislation. We need more research into the medical use of certain components, as well as design clinical studies and the input of the FDA. What other medicine do you know that hasn't been regulated by the FDA and is not prescribed by a licensed pharmacist? As a nurse practitioner, I find it mind-boggling. I also find it both interesting and head-shaking that when we're contemplating legalizing a product, that we are also talking about the need to put money aside into prevention and treatment. Does that not seem oxymoronic to us all? Why don't we prevent it in the first place? Let's take time to learn from Colorado, where they do increase, and I'm not going to go over them, the traffic, the emergency room. It's all documented very, very well. There are over 20,000 peer-reviewed articles listing marijuana to mental health and depression and psychosis. My son told me that after 3 years as a teenager with pot, the paranoia was overwhelming, and that he switched to alcohol use disorder and ultimately cocaine. I want to share with you that alcohol remains a major concern among the families in our group who are being decimated by this drug, and it is legal. We have not done well to regulate this product, and the money that has been legislated for prevention and treatment in the Alcohol Fund in 2002 has not been collected and distributed as planned.
30 seconds.
So while we're contending with a major substance use problem in our country and in our state, does it not seem prudent to try to solve this problem before we legalize another one? So thank you for taking the time to consider this bill, not on its alleged financial benefits, which will pale in comparison, but rather focus on the public health of our citizens. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McCune, and I'm sure that I speak for every member of the committee when we offer our deepest condolences.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay.
Pat, is it Tucker from the Franklin Task Force? Opposed and wishing to speak?
She had to leave.
Okay. Citizen, looks like Ashley Sullivan not speaking, but in opposition. Nicole Shedd from Katie. Since Katie's already spoken, we're going to ask you to hold still for now. James Norris is opposed from the State Police not speaking. Almost there.
Mr. Chair, are there any students left that haven't gotten to speak, even if they just express their opinion?
Sure. So, all right, so we got somebody from DHHS that we don't need them. They're here only for informational purposes. All right, students. Well, you're down as speaking. All right, I want to give the students first priority. So are there any students here from high school that have not spoken but wish to? Please come forward. Welcome. And
Thank you.
thank you for coming in. Pull that mic close.
Okay. I'm Marissa McGlynn. I just want to thank you all on the New Hampshire Senate. I'm a middle school student attending the hearing today with Raymond Coalition for the Youth, but I do not attend Raymond's Ivor Holmes Grove Middle School. I attend an art-based public charter school in Dover, New Hampshire. I love to learn, I love my school, but no matter where you are or what school district you happen to be in, marijuana use in children as young as 11 years old is an issue. It shall not be swept under the rug and should be addressed. HB 1598 is harmful, not only harmful to the youth, but even more harmful to the educational systems of students around New Hampshire. Marijuana dispensaries do not care about the risk it poses. They do not care for my future health. So why should they sacrifice the future lawmakers, scientists, and leaders to this hallucinogenic? Thank you, and I'll be willing to answer any questions.
Thank you for coming forward. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mike Holt from DHHS.
Thank you very much.
2 minutes, hard 2 minutes, guys.
For the record, my name is Michael Holt. I'm the program administrator for the Therapeutic Cannabis Program within the Division of Public Health, Public Health Services. And with me is Jenny O'Higgins, Senior Policy Analyst, Division of Behavioral Health Services. The department does not take a position on 1589, but we would like to provide information related to public health related matters associated with this bill, and also the unintended impacts the bill might have on the state's therapeutic cannabis program. The following public health related issues are not addressed in 1598, and they should be considered and addressed before passing the legislation. Basic cannabis safety issues are not addressed. Some are left to agency rulemaking, but there is no specific statutory guidance to address these areas. Requirements for child-resistant packaging, requirements for warning labels on packaging, specific potency limits and serving size limits, specific advertising restrictions such as prohibition of billboard advertising, and requirements for a universal symbol that a product contains THC. There are no social justice, social equity provisions in the bill, such as expungement of certain criminal convictions. Diversion issues are not addressed. There is no requirement for inventory controls, specifically no requirement for an electronic seed-to-sale inventory and point-of-sale system. There is no cannabis advisory board established in the bill. Such a board would allow public health, public safety, and other concerns about harm reduction to be voiced and considered as the adult use program is being developed and implemented.
So this bill also gives DHHS the responsibility of designing and implementing a public media and education campaign about the risks of cannabis use. And the allocation for that is $150,000 in this bill. So as you've heard in prior testimony, this will not be sufficient for an effective, robust, comprehensive campaign for those purposes. The other piece we'd like to see addressed in this bill is the public health data and surveillance needs. So in order for us to really do thoughtful planning and intervention work for prevention, treatment, and recovery continuum of care, we need that robust data, including short and long-term health effects of cannabis, emergency department visits and hospitalizations, impaired driving, and workplace impairment and worker-related injury. This would really help us to monitor trends and changes over time and to respond to the needs of our state. The disbursement of the funds to DHHS for prevention, treatment, and recovery really need to be explicitly protected with strong language to not be diverted from their intended use. So that's another piece. And of note in this bill on page 9, line 27, it does say the disbursement of all of this revenue is not required until state fiscal year 28, which is 5 years after the passing of the bill.
30 seconds.
We've heard about the impacts of the therapeutic cannabis program and the ATCs. I want to point out that this bill specifically authorizes the Liquor Commission to compete directly with the ATCs. In fact, HB 1589 requires the state-run dispensaries to sell cannabis for therapeutic purposes, essentially requiring the state stores to function as alternative treatment centers under a different conflicting regulatory structure, but without the requirement to be a not-for-profit entity. It shall be the duty of the commission, the bill says, to sell cannabis for therapeutic purposes as authorized under RSA 126X. It sets up, at best, it sets up a dual regulatory structure. Yeah. I'm sorry?
You're opposed.
We're concerned about this model. Right. And well, 2 minutes, I'll close by saying this is the first time that the Department of Health and Human Services has not opposed a cannabis legalization bill. We don't have a position on this bill, but this approach allows us a seat at the table, so to speak, and allows us to provide detailed testimony on important public health related matters relative to the legalization of cannabis.
Questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your haste. Darrell Eames, New Hampshire Cannabis Association, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator. And brevity is my middle name, so we're on the same page there. My name is Darrell Eames. I am the founder of the New Hampshire Cannabis Association, representing business and industry, and I also am an entrepreneur that started a company that connects cannabis companies with essential services they need to run their business. I speak with cannabis companies all over the country every day.
You speaking in favor?
I am speaking in favor. And I see the effects of both under-regulation and over-regulation. Oklahoma right now has a serious issue with what I call the gray market. They have cannabis cultivators and they're maybe not being able to track all that product and where it's going. And I also see what's happening in California with the over-regulation propping up the black market. I work with the association with NGOs, supporters, legislators from every side of the aisle as well, and I've got a unique perspective here, so I just want to paint a picture of what we might be looking at and what 1598 is trying to do. At some point, the federal government is either going to legalize or decriminalize. And at that point, either there's going to be no rules or there's going to be their rules. If you think what's happening to the ATCs if we get a legal market here is going to hurt them, wait until cross-border sales become a reality, which could happen with either of the federal government's decisions on cannabis. It will wipe them out, and it'll be the instant Walmartization of cannabis industry in the state. 1598 is trying to walk that line of what a market for New Hampshire should look like that works for our state. It may not be perfect, and in fact, we'd love to see the Senate add maybe a 6-month time frame with a path to private retail sales. We'd like to see edibles for those more health-conscious consumers of cannabis that don't want to smoke it or vape it. We'd like to see maybe even an option for the ATCs to go for profit so they don't get wiped out when this happens. But that alternate reality of us doing nothing is not going to not have an impact. So my recommendation would be to let's figure out the best way to get a methodology and an industry in place before that happens. And I would just end by saying that through the association, we have resources in almost every part of cannabis that you could think of. And all of them would love to answer any questions that any legislators have to kind of get down to the real nitty gritty of what's going on in industry and cannabis and how that all works. And with that, I'll yield any time for questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? Hearing none?
Thank you.
All right. So I have signed up as well to speak in opposition, Alicia Call. Oh, that's good. And Nicole Shed from Katy. Yeah. 2 minutes. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Nicole Shed, and I am the Juvenile Restorative Justice Director for Katy in the Central New Hampshire region. I've seen over time parental attitudes about cannabis softening regarding recreational cannabis use and are becoming increasingly permissive as our laws become less stringent. We've heard parents say things like, they just use a little pot. It's not that big of a deal. Actually, it's a very big deal. Marijuana can does cause harm, pain, and suffering among adults, families, and particularly our youth. Harmful outcomes resulting from marijuana use, especially early, frequent, and heavy use, include risks to brain development, physical and mental health, social well-being, and increased likelihood of drug driving, accidents, and other illegal drug use and addiction. The youth that I work with are high risk. They're from families that are struggling with addiction. The majority of these youth and their families are on Medicaid or Medicaid eligible. Just 6 months ago, 6 out of the 7 youth in my program had incarcerated parents. Today, the majority of these youth are being raised by their grandparents because of this parental addiction. Several years back, we had a youth in our program who was marked by trauma and had significant cannabis use disorder. When counseled on reducing use, he said, "I can't. It's the only thing that takes away the pain." So the very substance that caused the trauma in his life was a substance that he had to use to soften the pain that he had suffered. Psychiatric Times states that high potency THC is associated with 5 times higher probability of having a diagnosis of a psychotic disorder compared with a cannabis non-user. Increased risk of relapse following the first episode of psychosis was associated with frequent use of high potency THC. In cross-sectional studies of high-potency THC use, it was associated with depression and anxiety in adolescent THC users. These findings are concerning because adolescents typically have little information about the potency of THC they are using. As responsible adults in trusted positions, we have an obligation to serve the best interests of our most vulnerable children and youth. The legalization of recreational marijuana, as attested from experience in legalized states, will hurt our children. Adolescent suicide victims in Colorado are increasingly found with marijuana in their systems. We are also seeing suicidal ideation in our youth locally. Just 2 weeks ago, there were 3 teens in our local hospital ER. They were all waiting for beds at Hampstead Hospital, and most waited over a week to get a bed at Hampstead Hospital. We can and must do better by our children. Drug addiction and mental health crisis that we're currently in, our role must be to help our children. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I ask you to please protect New Hampshire's children by voting HB 1598 inexpedient to legislate. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Thanks very much. I think that completes my list. Is there anyone here that has signed up to speak and not been offered the opportunity? In that case, we're going to go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 1598, and I will take a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Daniels, seconded by Hennessy, and do we know where Senator D'Alessandro is? Yeah, somebody's got to have the Lou watch. Here. That's been moved and seconded that we'll go into executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. First bill I would like to take up is House Bill 527. That's relative to charitable gift annuities exemption. Is there a motion?
Move ITL.
Say Hennessy and Rosenwald, ITL. Discussion. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. I don't believe we heard from any charities that are looking to do this, and this is the smaller ones. And I apologize if I missed any of those emails. I have concerns about this and what it means for our smaller charities and the boards that are on those charities. So I'd like to have more information about this in the future, about why it's needed, the benefits, and address the risks that the committee has mentioned previously.
Further comments? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. I did speak with the sponsor of the bill and asked some questions, specifically how this benefited a charity versus someone just giving a lump sum to a charity and then taking the remainder of it and putting it into an immediate annuity. And there really wasn't an answer on that, so I would support the mixed being legislation.
Further discussion?
I concur. I think that did make. Excuse me, I concur. I don't think the explanation given was quite informative, to be honest with you. It left more questions than answers.
All right, so the motion is ITL on House Bill 527. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 5-0.
Move consent.
Moved and seconded. Hennessy, Rosenwald on consent. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So it's going on consent. Who wants to take it out? Senator Hennessy, you look like you're ready. Okay, next bill we'll take up will be House Bill 1097, relative to taxation of income in New Hampshire residents when working remotely for an out-of-state employer. I would move OTP. I should say actually OTPA, isn't it? It's amended. Ought to pass as amended. And seconded by Rosenwald. Any discussion? Senator Hennessy.
Do we have an amendment that you wanted to move?
We might. Didn't we already do it, though?
Is it 1328?
Yeah, 1328. So I would,
It's 1097, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, I did have it. Okay.
I just have a question on the amendment.
sure.
Is,
Well,
and I
first, do we have
see,
do we have a motion on the amendment?
oh,
So moved.
I'll move it for
Okay.
discussion.
All right, and seconded by Daniels.
My question is for DRA, and I see that Mr. Wong is here. I just want to make sure that DRA was comfortable with removing.
They actually drafted the language.
Oh, they did? Ah.
Good morning, Keen Ming Wong from the Department of Revenue. Yes, this is the language, excuse me, this is the language that we drafted and we pushed forward as requested by Senator Gaida.
Thank you.
All right.
Just one more question, Senator.
Sure, Senator Dallas.
Yeah, thank you. Does this meet the constitutionality of the commuter tax, which was declared unconstitutional in 1973?
We did not analyze the constitutionality of the of this language. This is just specifically to address the concerns from the House on what they wanted to do.
Okay, thank you, Yep.
Further discussion? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in a previous discussion that we may have wanted to change the word may on line 12 to shall.
That would be a friendly committee amendment if the members are in agreement.
Okay.
I am in agreement.
What does DRA say about that?
Yes,
Changing the may to shall.
yeah, we have no concerns with that as well.
No, okay.
And I did have some correspondence with Representative Spilsbury, and he also stated that he has no
Right.
disagreement with changing from may to shall.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so on Amendment 1328S to House Bill 1097 with the committee amendment of changing line 12, the word may to shall. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, the ayes have it. And,
Move off to pass this amendment.
ought to pass this amendment by Hennessy.
Second.
Second by D'Alessandro. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Carries. The last bill we'll take up is House Bill 1598 FN, legalizing the we want to put it on consent? Right. I'll take it out. Who wants to put it on
Move
consent?
consent.
Consent.
Okay, Hennessy, Rosenwald for consent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So the ayes have it. I'm not opposed, I'm assuming. Okay, now on to House Bill 1598 FN, legalizing the possession and use of cannabis.
I move ITL.
D'Alessandro moves ITL. I will second that. Any discussion? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I appreciate all of those who came out today in support and opposed of this bill, and all of the emails that we've received for both sides of the bill as well. Recognizing that ITL supports those who are opposed to the bill for reasons not to legalize marijuana. But today I'm going to speak to those who are opposed to the bill because they would like to see marijuana legalized in the state. A lot of the testimony that I received via email and discussions with my constituents, this doesn't do what they would like to see New Hampshire move forward with. It doesn't include edibles. It doesn't have an opt-in for municipalities. It has a 1,000-foot barrier between a school grounds and where a establishment may be put up. There's questions about the percentages that are going to the different how the percentages of the net revenue that goes into the fund or is going to be apportioned out. It doesn't address the concerns that a small municipality may have when one of these 10 establishments goes in their municipality, especially when they didn't have the opt-in option. I would be in favor of an increase in adequacy A versus a decrease in swept. The unfunded liability of the retirement system, given the amount of money that is projected to be earned, would not make much of a dent in that unfunded liability. And I think we could apportion that 30% out to something that we would make a huge difference in the state of New Hampshire. Let's see. Again, my constituents wanted to have edibles. I didn't mention that. I have the charitable trust concern. We didn't hear from them. The conflicts with the therapeutic cannabis that we've set up in the state, we've not allowed them to convert to a for-profit. And yet we're going to allow the state to sell therapeutic cannabis, but not actually provide the guidance around it. So there's just I would love to be able to fix this bill, but there's just too many questions that we've received that do not make it fixable for those who would like to see marijuana legalized in the state. Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I support this motion, but I also support legalization. But I find this bill just has so many problems with it, in addition to the ones that Senator Hennessy brought up. I'm overall concerned about the Liquor Commission's ability to take on another responsibility. I'm concerned about sending so much to the rulemaking process because we give up our constitutional authority to make policy when we do that, and we can never get it back without changing the law again. I'm not happy that it doesn't include the social justice and equity positions. It's just, this bill itself is not fixable today. So I'll be voting for the ITL.
Thank you, Senator, for your comments. Senator D.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a very poorly drafted bill, number one. So if we're going to do something, we ought to draft it properly. So let's set that aside. The ability to actually implement this it doesn't exist. It's a non-existent situation. I'm opposed to marijuana. I've dealt with it with students. I've dealt with it with constituents. It's a problem. I think that the situation is quite clear. The availability of marijuana on the, let's call it the black market, is pervasive. It's everywhere. We must deal with the ramifications of it. And the families of people, I empathize with them. You know, I've got a large family, a large extended family. I've had my grandchildren involved with marijuana, and it's created very, very severe problems. I think depression is one of the unbelievable consequences. Brain problems with your functionality, very, very problematic. Do we have to deal with it? Yes. I don't have the magic answer, but we have to deal with it. You know, we've got the situation with OxyContin, how everybody thought how wonderful it was and pushed it out the door. And now we have the ramifications of it. Addiction, death, all kinds of social problems. So I don't want those kinds of things to evolve. But this is not the way to solve that problem. Hence, as I say, I'm opposed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further comments? I'll be voting ITL on this bill, as I have voted ITL on every marijuana bill that ever came before me in my 12 years combined in the House and Senate. There's a reason the U.S. military prohibits the use of pot or any other drug, because it has an impact on reaction time, it has an impact on the psychological processes, and all of those things. Zero tolerance in the military. Understandably, there is a huge culture promoted in large part by the false narrative of the pro-marijuana industry that it's really not bad. It's horrifying when you look at the results as spoken to by Dr. Ebner, as spoken to by Katie, who deals every day with our youth, as spoken to by every single child advocacy organization in the country and every single police force in the country. Those are the people that deal with the consequences of the liberalization of the use of illicit drugs. Okay, those are the people I listen to. I also listen to the children, okay? Brave kids that come forward and say, we're being castigated in our schools and on the streets by our peers because we choose to stay pure and keep our lives in order and control our own lives going forward, not be subject to a terribly addictive, high-potency drug that destroys lives. I did a little bit of mathematics during the course of the hearing. Assume we have 1,350,000 people in the state. Assume we have 35% of those that are adults. 15% use. That would mean 71,000 people use this drug in the state. according to the statistics that were presented in the hearing. That means each of those persons is spending $3,600 a year, $300 a month. I will guarantee you that most of those users come from the lower economic strata of our society. We are talking about predatory practices here, and we don't need any more of those than we already have. We're talking about an industry. We have the big tobacco, we have big alcohol. Let's now establish and legalize big pot so that the vulturous national companies that are sitting here waiting to pounce as soon as this is legalized can come into our state and produce addicts and produce the misery, the expense to families and lives and children that marijuana is proven to produce over the long term. Psychosis, hyperemesis, extreme costs to our medical care facilities and our hospitals and our insurance companies and the whole ramification, the whole range of ramifications. I also heard in the testimony that there was no consideration given in the cost model for this of addressing the consequences. As I researched here several years ago in Colorado, it's $6,300 per case for cannabis use disorder. And it is now amongst the leading causes, of non-accidental treatment in the state of Colorado. Granted, this model would be different, but it's only another means to the same end, and that is producing death and destruction upon the citizens of this state. And for those reasons, I'll be voting in support of an expedient to legislate. Moved and seconded. Are there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of ITL signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. With that, it closes. Yeah, we can do that. Consent? Okay. Rosenwald, Hennessy on consent. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And I will take this out. I am looking forward to it. With that, we will close this session of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you all for coming.